Let's do it.
Hi there. We're
Hi.
welcome to this podcast. We got Shan here, the founder
Yay.
of Objective Personality, along with Dave. I felt like introducing her that way. I introduced Dave that way too. I was like, oh, the founder of Ops. Oh, wait, they're co-founders. But
Right, right,
anyway,
right. And that side person.
yeah.
Really
Oh
good. So
man.
happy to be here. Very, very thankful to be hanging out with you today.
Yeah, I was just
Trying to get your notes ready. That's so
yeah, I
fun.
had the YouTube open on another tab and it was here an echo. But yeah, today we're going to be talking about all kinds of things, personal stories, business, and the
Yeah.
future. And just a quick note on I'm naming this podcast the Abundance Mindset Podcast.
Oh, I love it.
And it's about, replacing the scarcity in our lives and our mindset with a mindset of abundance, like, having enough and believing that there's enough for everybody in the world,
Yeah.
like you can get yours, and we can get ours, and developing that inner strength so that you can have outer peace.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Love that.
but yeah, so happy to have Shan here, who is so good with the abundance and the love and patience. And
Sometimes.
yeah, we're all, working at it. And
Yes.
yeah, so the first questions are going to be around like business stuff and
Cool.
marketing and all that. So getting into it, when did the wedding photography, or what did the wedding photography business mean to you? I know you're like an artist in a lot of
Right.
ways forever and ever. And so like how was that wedding photography business, and
Yeah.
yeah, what did it mean?
Oh, that's great. Love starting off with that. Yeah. Back in the day, I mean, just like any other kid starting out, you kind of have no clue what your life is going to be like. You're just sort of like hoping that you have something that you're passionate about. Like go to college. Did you find your passion? Is your job something that you enjoy, or is it just some 9 to 5 or something like that? And I was always looking for something that I could get a creative expression, just mostly the visuals, trying to get some sort of creative expression that's going on in my head and then be able to capture it. And I did all the other things where it's like painting and illustrating, and all that good stuff. And it's still fun, interior architecture, all that kind of stuff. All that stuff is still fun, but like literally like the physical medium takes time. And so like when I found photography, I'm like, oh, I love this because it's so fast, like taking something that's in my head and then making it happen, like capturing that moment and doing that very quickly was very addicting, very fast. And that just happened to be one of the classes that I was taking in college. So I had interdisciplinary studies, which was 5 different majors combined into one. And one of the subclasses for I think it was interior architecture, or it might have been graphic design, but was photography. And it's funny, like I had an instructor that was like, "You're not good at this," and I'm like, "Okay, so that's a challenge." And so I just kept at it, and I just loved it, even though I wasn't good when I very first started. But I quickly picked it up. I was like, I don't care. I love this so much. I'm gonna get good at this. So, like right off the bat, I was taking, doing black and whites and stuff, and I had a friend that was like, "Hey, so I have this photographer that forced me to choose either color or black and white," and so I picked color. But can you come and just shoot black and white? So I was one of those really annoying like people at a wedding where they're like, "I'm gonna shoot behind the photographer or around the photographer." I wasn't bothering him, but it was still like, okay, fine. And of course, I brought my digital camera as well. So I did black and white film and digital at the first wedding. And that was something that just took off because at the time I was going to church. So they were friends of ours at church. And one thing led to another. It was basically that kind of game where she was like, "I like your pictures better than my photographer." And so her friend was getting married, asked the same thing. And then it just sort of snowballed very quickly. And my whole first year of doing photography, I played the game of you tell me how much you want to pay me because this is my first year. So I'm not expecting any money. And, then I would give them a hint. The last guy paid me 1,000. So like the very first year, I was just telling people like, well, the last person was able to, had a budget of 1,000. So go ahead and pay that if you want. If not, go less than that. And just every single person was paying me $1,000 just because, the art of the influence. And it was one of those things where I loved it so much, but wedding photography, just like anything else in life, was such a like brain challenge because it was unbelievably difficult because you have to be 5 different people on the wedding day. You have to be a coordinator, you have to manage things, you have to make sure that the list gets taken care of, you have to make sure that you're an editor later, a marketer, like the amount of different jobs that pushed me to do. So it was a lot of self-growth. I honestly, I was able to see all of my weaknesses very quickly, like in that business. But within a few years, I was making really good money, and my brides were all very, very happy. And it was just one of those things that I obsessively loved. But I definitely got to the point where I quickly saw, oh, I'm not going to be able to do this forever, because sometimes it was like 10-hour days. And there was a couple of weddings in my last year. I think I've talked about this on video before, but there was a couple of weddings in my last year where I was miscarrying, but I had it like in my contract. I was like, I will be there, rain or shine. And the only thing that would make me not show up is like some act of God, like that's kind of a part of the contract where they have act of God as is like, why didn't I come? It's like, I got hit by
Wow,
lightning.
that's a hell of a thing. Oh
Yeah.
my
And
God.
then technically that was a pretty intense act of God, but it was mentally, that was like the stopper for me, where I was like, I was going to the ER. I went to the ER twice that weekend. In between weddings, I had 2 weddings that weekend. And I was like, if I can't die, if I can't be dying and
If
also not show up to your wedding, I want a different job.
if there was
You,
ever a good reason, I'm pretty sure that would be it.
I just couldn't do
Some
it.
jackass in the corner be like, no, no, still go to work. Like, I'm
I
expecting
couldn't,
you to be there.
I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I just couldn't leave him
Oh my
out to
God.
dry like that. I'm like, I'm still standing, so I'm good. But yeah,
Dang,
that
that's
was one of those things.
relentless.
I loved the job. I loved creating that for brides and stuff. But I put too much pressure on myself for sure. It was one of those things where like you need
Did
to be able to give yourself a day off. Yeah.
anyone ever pull you aside and say like, "Hey, that's like unsustainable. Hey, like
Yeah,
get
Dave.
some help." Oh, oh, that's what it took.
Yeah. Eventually he was
Oh my
like,
God.
so what are you going to be
Yeah.
doing when you're, 60? And I'm like, oh, I didn't think about the NI. I didn't think about the future of my life source going into this isn't going to go well over time. So
Yeah, that's
yeah,
such a good framework. Is like, what would I do when I'm like 60 or 80, or can I
yeah,
keep this up,
exactly. How do you
or
maintain
would I
that?
regret? Would I regret doing this? That's another
Right,
frame.
right.
But yeah, I mean, it does seem like there's so much passion. It's good to, as much as it went to that level,
Yeah.
it's good that you had that. Like, actually, maybe let me not assert my values. Like, how do you feel that like you did that? Like, do you think that like, wow, that was a time, as hard as it was, like
Yeah.
I was made, like that was me,
Yeah.
I carried that. Like I can
Totally.
get that. I get that sense from you. Yeah.
Yeah, like I think it was, I made it in a couple of large magazines, and even I made it in like my weddings made it in this one book, like right alongside like my favorite top photographers. It was like them. And then I had like a whole spread in this book of like high end, wedding stuff. And, I made it in Brides Magazine a few times. So it was just, and on the top blogs. So it was one of those things where I was like, well, there it is, and I felt like I could have pushed it more. I felt like I could have gone farther, but it was still one of those things that I'll always look back onto. Like that was a business that I started from the very ground up and was very proud of myself for the consistency that I did and all of the lessons that I learned. I had to learn how to blast. The first couple weddings I went to, my very first year, I would just show up and be like, okay, tell me who you want in the wedding party. And realizing that the bride and groom were more chaotic than even I was. So like there was one wedding where they're like, we didn't get photos with this family member, like this specific group. I'm like, we got everybody, but it wasn't like this specific group. And they were bummed about that. And I was like, okay, so I need to do even more blasts. So it was one of those it was just a challenging time. And it was like the first time really having to learn to go on my own. I'm going to have to bring in the couple ahead of time and make them write out a list. Be like, you write out a list and I will make sure this list gets done on that day. So that was hard because I just
So
wanted to wing it. Like, just wing it and hope you get the photos you want. Like, yeah, I learned my lesson on that one.
Yeah, like
Learning time.
so like a tangential thing there is like, is there a danger in loving what you do that
Hmm.
much? You know, there's this advice of following your passion,
Yeah, right.
and when you take that all the way to the bank and you're just running on straight passion, like how did like is there like danger to that? And maybe how can someone like think about it like one level better, or like how would you go and revise
Right.
the way you would like, hey, it's great, I love that, but like maybe
Right.
do, yeah.
I don't necessarily think so, because I think that a person will cause problems with something that they hate and something that they love. I think the bigger thing that people cause problems with is not necessarily listening when the universe is knocking on their forehead. And that to me seems to be the biggest thing that will stop people. That if you're not setting goals and then checking yourself to see if you reach those goals, you're in big trouble. And that's what I see happening to a lot of people, is that they're not setting goals. They're going off of goals that they made, years ago, months ago in their business, and then never rechecking those. Like, just saying, I want to do this. It's like, oh, I want to do this kind of marketing. Oh, I want to do this kind of product. And it's like, being really careful that if you're going to go into business, that's one thing. So business is a very different thing than being an employee, but you can still conceptually do the same thing, where you're asking the market before you're asking yourself. And the problem that I see, that I run into my own self, is I'll be asking myself thinking that I'm asking the market. And you really gotta be like, okay, self, what is it that I want out of this? Is it that I want enjoyment and I don't care if anybody buys this? Do I want the money from this and I'm getting my needs met in a hobby outside of the business? You really have to get extremely self-honest with what you want out of your own life. If you're an employee for somebody else, what is it that you exactly want? Because a lot of times the conflict will come with thinking that I'm getting what the market I'm giving to the market what they need. And then when they're unhappy, you're like, you fight that. And it's like, no, 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 this has everything to do with you're having secret needs that you're trying to get met, and not being honest with those secret needs that you're trying to get met, being way more aware. So like, an example would be, I'm I might be thinking that I'm making, like, oh, I'm here to just make the brides happy. And one thing that I got aware of over time is that I I was trying to get my artistic needs met, that was making me excited about the job. And then I would say, well, that's just the kind of photographer I am. I'm a fine art photographer. So if you don't like it, then go find somebody else. And in reality, like, one of the things that was obvious over time, that no matter how artsy a bride was, they always really cared about the family photos. And the family photos are boring. You know, make sure you get the space around the edges and have everybody's toes not cut off and everybody's heads not cut off. Like, everything has to have a lot of space so you could put that in a frame. And for some reason, that was what every bride cared about, no matter how much they were like, oh, we love artsy. It's like, no, what really people want, your customer wants, is, I want me looking really nice on that day, and I want to really see my face, and I want us all to be smiling, and I want you to see the whites of my eyes. And it's like, it took me a long time. I used to do what's called Dutch photography, where you're like tilting the screen. And this was like really big back when I started. And now looking at a lot of my photos, I'm like, these are so obnoxious, where I'm artsy and I'm tilting. It's like, just get the damn picture where it's straight and you could see their dress and you could see their face. But I had an agenda that I wasn't even aware of. And I think that that happens a lot. Like, even if you're working for someone else, you always you have some sort of side agenda, and there's no problem with that. But not being honest with yourself about that becomes a problem. Because if I'm trying to make money by making these brides happy, and I keep trying to get my artistic needs met in this wedding, then really quickly I will be fighting and saying, well, that bride was just not for me. Well, that bride was just not just for. It's like, look, every bride wants this. Stop trying to get your artistic needs met if that's not what this business actually is requiring of you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And honestly, I feel like I can blast it back to you through a demonstration in
Love
terms
it.
of like, we're 15 minutes into
Yeah.
this live, and I'll just out myself in terms of like kind of how I'm doing this, for example, like
Right.
the podcast. So my goal here is to kind of, ask these questions, that
Right.
are, um, about personal stories, all kinds of things, and then hopefully kind of like meander around different points and parts of the story. And people might be wondering, hey, why is Habib asking these questions? And the idea
What's
is
your
kind
hidden
of like,
agenda?
yeah, what's my hidden agenda? I think
Right.
I just want to see, when someone is given the space to be themselves,
Yeah.
like what can we see and who
Yeah.
is the person? Who are we becoming? And from this, from this self and from our own personal growth, like what lessons can we share with the world and be public with that
Right.
to the extent that we are comfortable.
Right.
And then, yeah, that's hopefully what, we're able to accomplish today on some level.
Mhm.
And yeah, so the next question is also personal. But it's also about marketing and business, and that's like, what did you end up learning? What you wanted to learn from Dave about marketing?
Yeah. That's where it all started.
Yeah, because he like I was gonna go with the question also of like, hey, like bring friends into it in terms of like,
Yeah.
hey, like who's watching your back, right? And
Yeah.
then you answered Dave. Dave's watching
Yeah.
your back, and so
Yeah.
I am very curious about this aspect of like, hey, with these business struggles,
Yeah. Right.
the health struggles as well,
Right.
combining there, and yeah.
Right. Yeah. I think that's what attracted me to Dave so much is that a lot of people in my family, I was the what do you call it? Not black sheep, but like set it and forget it child because I always managed everything my own self. My mom was telling me the other day, she goes, Shan, you always I never had to remind you. You were always getting your school supplies. You were always the one like making sure that you were on time for things. You were always the one that was making sure that you um, got your work done because I had written my name on school, signed my name to that and therefore panicked, because I didn't prepare enough, but then I was like scrambling and gathering. So because of that, my family had sort of, and my family had a lot of other people that they were babysitting, so there's just a lot of babysit games that my mom was doing for other family members. So I was very much on my own. If I had to get something solved, it was on my own. If I had to get something to work, it was very much on my own. So um, I I had a problem where I was consistently booking every single bride that would meet with me, but I had no idea how to get the word out. So like getting the word out, blast basically, was really really hard for me. So I consistently got all of my clients where it was just word of mouth, where this one would tell that one, this one would tell two people, this one. So that was really really effective, but I wanted to, it's like, how do you reach a client that is at a higher price point? How do you do that? Like, I just didn't know how to market myself. And when I reached out, I was, my ex-husband was friends with him back in college. So reached out to Dave because Dave was doing a lot of YouTube stuff. So I had never even thought of, as a wedding photographer at the time, I had never thought of um, what it would mean to get on video. Like, why would I get on video? What am I going to say on video? And of course I'm not blessed. So I'm like, I don't know how I would ever, like, what am I going to do? What's the point of that? But he's like, you have no idea how much video is conveying something. Like, if you show a bride who you are, how casual you are, what it's like to work with you before you show up, that means a lot. So he helped me with that, let alone like just the power of video. And then the second thing that he really helped me with, this is what was just sort of a logistical thing, is that because I'm skib, because I'm blast last gathering, I would just show up to weddings and I would just shoot, 2,000 photos and hope I got it. And so I was always leaving the wedding feeling anxious until I would do a blog post where I had narrowed down the best shots. And I'm like, okay, these are really beautiful. I got it. But that anxiety level was just ripping me to shreds. And he taught me to, he's like, here, do this, get your 10 shot list. So I still think about that to this day, is my 10 shot list, where it's like, if I leave the wedding, I feel good because I got these 10 shots. So sort of like doing your NI ahead of time, like making sure that I categorically am like, okay, I want a shot that's like this, 3/4 of the bride. I want a shot like this. So like, of course they're going to give me their family photos, but I need to know as a photographer when I leave, I got my needs met so I can go to sleep at night, because a lot of times not knowing whether you did well or not was the stress. So marketing wise, he taught me how to get on video. He taught me how to speak. He taught me how to show what I want to sell. That was really huge. And then also narrowing down, what is it exactly that I can do consistently over time? And then that last one was really helpful, because I conceptually still use that, the concept of knowing what you are trying to achieve before you ever show up. That's a really big one that's helped me in many different areas. And having Dave show up to actually contribute was like, of course, that's where our first bonds were, because my family members didn't want to have anything to do with it. Even at the time, I had tried to make some family members be second shooters at my weddings. And it just was like, one of them just kept dropping camera lenses. It was like, okay, fine, I'll do it by myself. So for Dave to actually show up and be like, I'll help you, and I'm going to actually give you useful information, it's just a very connecting thing where somebody else cares about your, what you are trying to achieve just as much as you. That's bond building. It's one of those kinds of things where you're like, I've never had anybody in my life show up and want to help me achieve my own goals. So yeah, that's why very quickly we bonded.
Wow, that's like a beautiful love story of
Yeah.
the number two
Yeah.
responsibility. Like,
Yep. It's
oh my
exactly
God, you love it when a team comes together.
Right. I
You're
became
like,
one
yeah.
of his Santa Claus bags.
Oh my God.
I'll take that
Yeah,
on.
and Santa Claus bag, that's how we get Christmas,
There you
without
go. That's so great. Love that.
Yeah, oh my God.
Yes.
So then, that's great. And yeah, I totally see. Yeah, I know when I wrote these questions, you let me know, you're like, you know what? I could probably answer some of these for like an hour. And I know honestly from that, probably keep going. But just to continue hitting more topics, I have one from my wife. Her name is Chi. She's also an
Hi,
ESFP.
Chi.
And yeah, she asked, what is it like running a business from your home and working with your partner?
Right. That's so good. Over the years, it's been incredibly difficult. Yeah, because Davey and I are so opposite. So like in the early days, it was nuclear energy. It was just cats and dogs fighting over every little thing. And I very much, am sensitive. If I put my name on something, I care if I'm doing it right. And Dave does not hold back. Like Dave is very honest and doesn't hold back his opinion about things. And when he's frustrated about stuff, so it took us quite a few years to try and get some kind of normalcy. And the biggest thing that helped is person A and person B, because if I'm signing my name to something, I don't want to fight with somebody over the control of something. Because really quickly it's like, oh, I have my version, and he has his version, and we are just, like I said, like we're just absolute opposites. So he's like, oh, I think you're doing it wrong. Like, I think you're doing it wrong. I wouldn't do it that way. And so my TE would react to that and be like, what do you mean I'm doing it wrong? I can see where this is going to be successful. I've done things like this in my past. I know what it takes to make something work well. It's just going to meander a little bit before I get to the end goal. And his way of coming at it is like, I'm going to just duct tape the ST, but I will overcompensate with my NF and make it that funny and make that the funny part of the show. So because we had just wildly different ways of doing stuff in the early days, it wasn't like, cool, I see your way of doing things and I think that that's neat. And cool, I see your way of doing things and I see that that's neat. No, it was always like this, very much so, for a very long time. And the person A, person B thing forced it to be where, all right, I promise that this is what helped. I promise that when we are done, we will both be happy. But in the process of this game, both of us, you're going to look confused because you don't have every single thing that I'm staring at in your box. Therefore, you're going to be like, why that? Why this? Why that? Even if I could blast 100 times. If his consume isn't taking it in, it doesn't matter. It's like, I still don't see it. I still don't see it. It's like very difficult to transfer information. So if I can promise that when this is done, that both of us are happy, that made a really big difference. And then choosing which person is going to be person A, person B. And a lot of that was then just setting it up to be like, just so we can both like, let's talk about this once the project is over, so we can see it as a success, and also recognize that in the beginning, when this first happened, you were not on board and I was not on board with your way of doing things. But once it got done, it was a success according to some goal. So, but still having that in your house, like trying to raise Cody with that like business going on, it was just next level hard. Like I say it in very lightheartedness now, but at the time it was extremely brutal. It was so brutal, and it was a lot to put us through. It was a lot to put Cody through. But I mean, the thing about oil and water, the thing about cats and dogs, is the amount of growth that you get from it is a lot. You know, when you're with somebody that is challenging every single thing that you do, say, think, it really does force you to grow. It forces you to find different ways to communicate. It also forces you to challenge yourself, to be like, okay, I'm really confident about this, but maybe I'm missing information. Maybe I don't see what is actually needed here. I do have to take that into consideration as well. So over the years, what ended up happening is we just were like, this one's mine and this one's yours. Like actually doing stuff together. We do it on projects that don't matter as much, that can take time, so we can go slowly when we talk about stuff. Because otherwise it's like, you know, we want to be able to go fast, and fast means aggressive.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, I don't want
Just
to
to
fight about it.
blast back a little bit of what the person A, person B thing is. First of
Yes,
all, let me
please
just
do.
say I highly recommend it. My
Right.
wife and I have been doing this. We have a new child, and
Yeah.
you know, our first kid, and it's going well.
Yeah.
You know, knock on wood. But I don't know. But yeah, the person A thing is like, so the person A takes charge of the task or the project, and the person B is in a support role. So person
Yeah.
A can like give tasks to the person B,
Yeah.
and you know, but ultimately the person A is responsible for that project or task.
Right.
And it's really good because I would say that you have a certain unconditional patience for, you know, the person A if they're screwing up, or the person B if they're screwing up.
Right.
It's because like, hey, at the end of the day, person A's name is on that,
Right.
and they're accountable for that.
Right.
And it's never person B's fault for
Yes.
the
Right.
project going wrong.
Yes.
Because like, hey, that's on you, person
It's
A.
on
Like if person
you.
B doesn't do anything, like
Even if
person A
I'm
is,
being
yeah,
stupid as person B, it's still on you.
exactly. And it's
Yes.
like, unless there's some egregious thing, I mean, but that's like, you know, there's
I
always
know.
exceptions
Right.
to every rule, right?
Right.
But yeah, it's anyway, it's like really good. I highly recommend. You know, I know also with like, I'm not gonna talk about it now, but the error log was one of the
Yeah.
NIs that I was like, all right, we need to dig into this more, and maybe we will
Yes.
more in the future. But I think everyone in the community is monkey napping on that one. I hear a lot of good
Consciousness.
things.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Bring up the
but
consciousness.
I would say for those who are looking for something else, especially in terms of like you know, working with a partner or a
Yes.
teammate or anyone, or even
Yeah.
probably your children, I feel, right?
Yes. Right.
The person A, person B, like I remember Dave said, hey, he puts, you know, Cody in charge of something and
Yes.
just like lets him, you know, run with it. And that's a
Yes.
lot of autonomy. And it is kind of this unconditional love or unconditional patience
Yes.
for the work, in the context of the work.
Very much so. Because you're surprised, like with Cody especially, you're like unbelievably surprised at how much he was able to like jump in and solve stuff. Like the things that Cody would, you know, Dave doesn't like doing the ST stuff, so he's like, all right, you know, he had like a couple of different things. One of them was his workout machine, and it's just like, you know, 50 parts, and he's like, all right, Cody, you're in charge. Let's see if you can get this going. And like watching Cody be able to be like, let's go, and he just turns into like a miniature adult, and you're like, well, that's great. Glad I gave him the opportunity to do that. Otherwise, I would have had that win, and now it's Cody's win that he was able to figure it out, read the directions if he needed to, and get that up and running. And second thing he did that Dave really put the pressure on him for, or gave him the reins of, was an osmosis machine. And like I got one, and I was like, you got to try this. And then Dave was like, fine, okay, we'll do an osmosis machine. But then put Cody in charge of the ST. And watching Cody like figure out even all the NT of it was so great and was such a huge win. And again, like that's something he can take to the future with him, is like, I had this win. But if you know, you as a parent are constantly coming in and spoon feeding or saving the day, then that person doesn't get the confidence boost, because it's a huge confidence boost to be like, okay, my name is on this. You go to sleep thinking about it, you wake up trying to resolve it, and then, you know, once you solve that puzzle, you get a huge boost. And it's
Yeah.
just very powerful. Yeah, for sure.
Um, and and speaking of the person A stuff, one of the questions is about, you know, yourself in terms of person A having the number one thing going. What's it like being responsible for setting the direction of
Yeah.
op and that kind of thing? Like that seems to be
Yeah.
something where like maybe Dave with the number two,
Right.
he's not best positioned to do that. Like you're
Right.
seeing things across, you know, over the horizon, you know,
Right. Right.
that, yeah.
I feel like what's interesting about Dave, so his saviors are so built for number one, like that's what's kind of interesting. And so like a lot of times he would use like a random number one ism where he would set like, okay, here's our destination, here's where we're going. But then he would like put his head back down and start going into the like spinning in circles, you know, number two stuff, where it's just distraction. We're working on this today. We're going to dive to the bottom of this today, you know, that kind of stuff. And so in the early days where he was like, okay, we're going to go to the FBI, and like gave that like directive, like that's such a like, you know, NIFI directive, like this is where we're ending up, this is where we're going. And then let's put our heads back down and work on a bunch of the stuff around to somehow get there. The thing that I would see though is that year after year, it was never like brought back up. And for me, like my pants are on fire until I get something I wrote my name on, you know? So as a number one, like I write my name on something and just everything I think of is related to that one goal. And so I think, and it's just funny because now that we've been typing people in the community and hearing like the different socials and stuff, I can't tell you how many people just say the exact same language that are number ones, like signing my name to something, signing my name to something, signing my name to something. And what that means is there's a, for me, and I think it is also my masculine and I, but there's an extremely like block to block to block to block to block. It becomes like Maslow's pyramid, like where you're like, I have to own this level of the video game before I go to this level of the video game. And then that one leads to that one, that one leads to that one. And I'll see Dave like working on one over here and then jumping to one over here and then jumping to one over here. And I'm like, you're not gonna get there because this one can't be solved until you own this one. And this one can't be solved until you own this one. And this one can't, like, you have to be able to set like these heavy blocks down, win at video game level one, because that one supports the next level. And that intense vision, I may seem like I'm going slow, but I'm like, I can't go work on, you know, like merch. Like the amount of people that asked us for merch in the first year was like insane. Like, where's your merch? Where's your merch? Where's your merch? Just because that's what they've seen out there. And so they're like assuming like, okay, I want merch. So please do merch. And I'm like, the level I would have to own before I get there, I can't do that until I own this and own this and own this and own this and own this. So that has been extremely eye-opening because my saviors contradict my socials. And so now just telling myself I'm allowed to think like that. And if I don't like lean on what I'm already trying to do, then we're not going to make it, you know, as a team, as a whatever, like we're not going to be able to go to this end destination if we're all very scattered. So it was really like, I had the vision. I had this intense vision of like, obviously this is how it should go. But as a DE, I'm like waiting for somebody else to tell me, okay, you can say that we can do that. You can lead us so that we can do that. And like finding out, just getting stronger at my FI, knowing what number ones are supposed to do. I'm like, oh, that's me. I'm up. I'm the one that tells me the permission to do that thing. So self-permission. Okay, got it. You know? So yes.
Yeah, I'll take this opportunity to give lot of credit to you for launching that new website. I know you had help
Thanks.
and everything, but you drove that.
Very much so.
You're definitely in the driver's seat for that, and we all appreciate it. We all love it,
God, thank
and
you.
there's so much good in the new website. And if you haven't signed up, there's a link in the description.
I love you for that.
You know,
That's great.
here's
Yes. Come on
yeah,
over.
yeah, it's always nice to flex for others. That's a
Thank
side note
you.
of like, that if you're gonna be a number one, like go do that. Put your
Go
flexing
support.
energy
Yeah.
to something good, like
Uh,
um
that's so good. I love that.
especially when you see someone like doing good, like
I know,
definitely
right?
refer people around. And you're up to so many good things. I just can't wait for like the future of everything you have to bring, but
Yeah.
also what you've already done, like
Yeah.
this new website, everything, the ebook, and yeah, just everything is so good.
I
And the
know.
live show,
That was
is
Dave.
amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
Holy
Good,
crap.
good. I'm glad
Yeah.
you like the live show. Yay.
And the questions, like, this is everything that people have been waiting for,
I
honestly. Like,
know.
you just Santa Claus bag, wrap that in like a number 3 package, and just
Yes.
like, oh my god, if you follow Dave and Shan, if you follow their content, if you're following Objective Personality on any level, like, just at least sign up for a month or two on op and go check out the live shows, because they're
Yay.
amazing.
Yeah.
There's a
Thank
lot
you
of
for that.
really good content on there. And Shan and Dave, well, Shan's answering a lot of these questions that the community has had for possibly years.
I know. That's
And
what the purpose was. Yeah.
yeah, and it's also like, the rubber's meeting the road, as
Yes.
a ST blockhead, like, for me, like, it's important for this theory, for the NF and the NT, to actually make some practical,
Yes.
real world impact.
Are you
And
getting
you get to
your,
see that.
yeah.
Yep.
Yes. Love, 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 love. Yes. Very much so. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that a lot. Yeah. The biggest thing was, and again, that was another one of those blocks where I'm like, I can't do the live show until I can get my own life consistent enough to where I would be able to show up for something like that. We can't do that if the production isn't super, managed and easy and clockwork. So all of that stuff had to get owned before we can then move towards the future of larger things. And I've been hearing the community wanting that kind of interaction for a long time. And I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna have to blast. I'm gonna have to blast if we do that, because it's a live show needs play energy, and it's not Dave's thing to do play energy. He keeps mentioning like, I'll do one here and there, like he wants to. So that's good. I think eventually he'll come in and be like a substitute teacher, which will be great.
Yeah,
But
yeah, that would
yeah,
be, yeah, I find that like crafting a job for another person, like, that
right.
takes work. Is like, all right, just all right, you can come in for these 20 minutes here,
I
and then,
know, right?
but then you have to like plan around that. And it's
Yes.
actually like 8 hours of work to plan around someone
Yes.
showing up for 20 minutes. Like, you went through
Yes.
that. I know, I kind of like showed up in one of the live shows, and
Right. Yes.
I bet that was a lot of work. Like, how do I work these people into
Oh,
this bigger
totally.
context of this thing? Like,
Totally.
I totally get
That
it.
took me a
Yeah,
while. I had
it's
to talk that out with Dave, because I was like, okay, so how do I put them at the beginning? Do I put them at the end? Yeah, that kind of stuff definitely wrecks my brain, because I know what I want to say. I know what I want to say, but then as soon as like the tribe comes in, my NI gets fuzzier. And so I realized from the first live show, where it took me a while to get around to my NI of it, the second live show, I went straight to, because I have the questions page where I have a bunch of people asking the questions. I didn't look at that until I had fully done my whole outline. And then I looked at their questions. So I'm like, oh, good. I'm answering a lot of these questions. So I was able to like then add more slides, add more stuff dependent on the questions. And then once I got your guys' stuff in there, I'm like, okay, now I need to have a third voice, which is just hard for the DE. It's like, how do you include all these voices that want like, okay, this is a topic I want to hear about. This is what I want to hear about. And then also filter that into what my voice is.
yeah.
Just
Like,
a lot of back and forth, which is good. I
I'm
love it because it's so much brain practice,
I'm sure everything's going to get better and better,
Yeah,
but let me just say
hopefully.
this, 2023, like, that consciousness live show, especially your presentation, the
Good.
slides, the amount of work, and the number 3 energy of the specialized that you
Right, the
put into
slides are
that.
specialized.
Like,
Yeah.
I would say Shan put a lot of effort into that. Well, I'm just pretending you did, because it was
Yeah.
actually really, yeah, you did. Okay.
The depth,
Yeah,
yeah.
because it was so good. I hope people get the NI and it doesn't go over their head. But yeah, those slides, they mean a lot, like,
Good.
at the end of the day, NIFI can be very like short and sweet, but like, it actually means something else, and you kind of have
The
to apply
pile.
it.
Yeah.
How you apply it to reality, like, that's
Yeah.
on you. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's, and you kind of also have to get the context, and sometimes FI can be like an inside joke. So if you don't like the Matrix and you're like watching this and you're just like,
True.
good luck, good
That's so
fucking luck.
true. I don't
You
like
have
the
to get
Matrix.
over that.
Tough.
And
You're gonna hear my FI.
yeah, oh my god,
So
but
true.
yeah, like don't miss the point there. But yeah, the consciousness live show, that one was like a very very good one. I'm not saying that just because I was in it, but no, no, but really, there's a lot of
Thanks for
good
that.
stuff in the presentation part. And yeah, Felix did a really great job. So
I
shout out
know.
to
It
him
was
too.
nice having both of you there. Very cool. I think
Yeah,
people appreciate that, the connectivity as well.
yeah, and okay, so I'm gonna circle back to this question about the op market, because here we're talking about everything we're trying to put out, or you're trying to put out, right,
Yeah.
into the world, and like, hey, what are the people asking for and all that. Like, what's your kind of view of the op market, and like, let's say the parts of the community response and the emails and all that stuff that's actually relevant to you in terms of like, hey, you know what, these things that people are saying, that does line up with the direction I want to take things. So
Sure.
I'm talking more about that. Like, what is it about the, who is your market, with the understanding of, I'm sure you have some people here and there you're not really trying to serve.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, I guess I could start with that. I think the biggest thing that, well, first of all, in general, the therapy side, the getting, getting actual emotional needs met, getting it feels like, if life was a pie, was a pie chart, the amount of needs that we actually have in our NF, in the emotional resolving processing, is so large, and the amount of resources that the human has at this, in 2023, is very small. And I think that that's what becomes your market. Like the force is like, look, people need connection. People need to communicate about what's going on in the darkest parts of their mind. And there is like the psychology market today is very very low as far as what it's resolving. Like it's not actually resolving anything that's going on. It's very surface level, attempts. But if you don't have the core of what's going on in the brain and the wiring and what, different needs are there, it's very very difficult to be able to treat that. So there's your giant need. There's this huge need that isn't quite being addressed. The problem also comes from the human wanting a very quick fix, an easy button to resolve these things. Let me just take this thing and then get back to my life. Unfortunately, just like working out, like if you're going to go to the gym, like it's not something that you can just go take something quickly and then go back to your regular life and your regular habits and have any success in that area. The mind is just like the body, it's a muscle. So it's hard. It's not going to be easy. And the brain is hiding all of this stuff from yourself as is. So because of all that, you know, giant thing that is existing in the universe, we are just having to manage and maintain that thing. The part where we're seeing op plays a role is if we don't push on people on the front end, we get the avatar, the person of the coming in wanting to be coddled, wanting this to be easy, wanting it to be quick, wanting to feel good. A lot of people are going into like the therapy or taking a personality test because they are feeling low and they're wanting to use it as a quick, like, let me just feel better about myself. Let me see something about myself that's positive and let me just do that fast. And our challenge has been like, how do we get people to recognize that this is something where you're grabbing the human and you're pulling them deep down into the darkness of the parts that your brain doesn't want to look at. That's a huge responsibility. That's a giant thing to have to manage. And so part of that is like, wait, you're gonna like now do a business about that? You realize that you're going to make the majority of your customers upset, right? Like, how are you going to manage that consistently? Because you're forcing somebody to see something that their brain doesn't want to see, and it's just two idiots on the internet. Like, what is there? How do they have any say in this? So it's such a weird thing to do, where you're like telling people something that is going to make them unhappy and inherently make them unhappy. Like, don't do a business like that, you know? Usually it's like, here's some cotton candy, a positive interaction, here's the money exchange, see you later. And it's a one-to-one, and you don't have to like follow up on that. But the thing here is that we're actually trying to do something that adjusts the way the human looks at psychology so that it can actually get some ST work done in reality. And that's just a lot. So as far as the kind of customers that we're looking for, I'm trying to push more towards, if we make you uncomfortable, that's a good thing. And if we make you uncomfortable and you leave, that's a really good thing. So yeah, we cuss, we're aggressive, we talk about things that are offensive in a lighthearted way, because it's so hard to deal with this stuff that it's like, if we're not laughing about it, it gets too serious too fast, and then everyone's really dark. Like, I want to make fun of the fact that I'm blast last. I don't want to be like, guys, I'm blast last and it's ruining things in my life. It's like, I'm blast last and I'm such an idiot. Next, like, the more I can keep my own huge failures as something that is lighthearted because it is solvable, that's huge. But again, it ruffles a lot of feathers because of how difficult it actually is. People are not used to coming into an arena where it's supposed to be like hugs, hearts, and flowers. And we're like, haha, you have demon this, it's okay.
Switcheroo. Yeah. Oh my God. Like, I reel them in.
Right.
And then, what is it? With some niceness, some friendliness, and then surprise, motherfucker, I'm a number one.
Right,
and everyone's like, what the hell happened to friendly Habib? Where's our teddy bear Habib? He's gone.
Right.
Who's this number one asshole? Like,
yes.
No.
Yes.
I did swap out my lion mug for this little Pikachu mug. No.
The soft side. Yes.
The feminine FI makes an appearance.
There you go. Right.
Yeah. It's yeah, I mean, we're all kind of living contradictions in a way.
I know. That's it. And that's the reality. It's like, love, cherish, care, because this is really hard. Also, get your ass moving. This is possible to resolve, push through what's hard. Otherwise, it gets so much harder. I think my big motto is pain now, so there's less pain later. Because if you just go for no pain, no pain, no pain, no pain, you're just creating such a huge problem in your life,
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I mean, like, I think there's a whole topic here. The next, finally transitioning to mental health. And we already talked about quite a bit. So, let's see where this goes. So how do you, so psychology, I mean, there's so many ways to take op, and this is just one way, right? We talked about the FBI a little bit, and we talked about, well, there's like military stuff, politics stuff. You could take it so many different directions, and just like understanding, let's say, Vladimir Putin or whoever else, right? Like Trump.
Right.
There's so many ways to take this, and but one of them is mental health, and for the person working out their own psychology, for them fighting their own resistance in their mind of, like, being held back but not even knowing what's holding them back.
Right.
And how do you view the experience okay, so just getting into it, how do you view the experience of therapy in general, like the good side and the bad side? Because I feel like there is a way to go to therapy where, yes, you're getting coddled, and then there's a way to do it where you're like really working, like you're taking your notepad there, you're independent of the skill of the therapist, you're still squeezing out whatever value you can.
Yes.
I'm currently going through that myself. Like, I have not that it's like outright bad. Let me just say a little bit, like, so like, I have a therapist right now who is probably a thinker, probably TE, but I'm not dismissing it outright. I'm like, you know what? She has more NT than me. Let's see if I can get some NT from it.
Absolutely.
Like, at first I was like, oh, I want a feeler therapist, but then like I ended up with someone who's like more on the NT. So I'm like, all right, fine. Let's see what we can get from this.
Let's block bang together.
Yeah, let's just go there. And especially, and it does end up being this more deep conversation where she's kind of going through more of her functions, trying to get to feeling. And it's like, oh shit, and it becomes this other kind of experience. But anyway, back to that, like the therapy, like how can people maybe use that, like, and also understanding that there's a coddling side and the making the most out of it side.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing going on with therapy today that if op were in the equation that would help is I think the problem is that a lot of therapists are projecting, just like every human projects, but the therapist is no different. They're just a human on this planet, just like you and I, that will project what their problems are onto you. And so a lot of times you will be getting somebody giving you advice based on their own savior functions. And um, you know, if they have TI and you don't have TI and it's a demon TI, it's like, okay, here's your truth. You need to make sure that you're sharing your truth when really that's not what you need. So you're like, okay, so how would you ever get any value out of that? There is so much value that can come from you, your own self, talking out what is painful for you, talking out what is stressful for you, talking out what gives you anxiety. And a lot of what the therapist is just there to do is be a sounding board. So if you're like hoping for magical information coming from someone outside of yourself, it's really like the way that I view therapy is you're paying somebody to listen to you. You're paying somebody to listen to the darkest parts of yourself. I would be taking advantage of this is just somebody there to let me talk out what I already know about my own self, what I already am feeling, getting it out from my crazy brain to something outside of myself so it becomes more objective. That's to me the way more valuable thing. Because if you start going to friend after friend after friend, you start wearing down the people around you by being a Debbie Downer because you're constantly talking about your darkness, constantly talking about the hardest parts of yourself. It's a beautiful arena where you're like completely allowed to talk about the darkest parts of yourself and not mess up any interaction between you and your friendship where you're trying to keep a balance. Like you're allowed to be completely imbalanced in this one area. I think that's way more valuable. It's like the workout is going to come from your own self. So thinking that the other person is there to save you is I don't think that's going to help at all because their functions, they have their own weaknesses, they have their own drama themselves. It's not like they're going to be somebody that is outside of the game of working on their own stuff. They still go home, they still have a hard time, they still have their own demon functions and their own anxieties. It's just a human. So the value is not from let me get the perfect therapist. The value is you today are coming to unload and you're responsible to somehow get something out of all this stuff that you're vomiting out, like watching the self vomit. Like, okay, I'm saying all of this stuff. Where did that come from? I didn't realize I was that panicky about something. That's the same thing what's going on with the error log. Like you're getting stuff out of your brain. You're writing all this stuff down. And then you got to come at it like a therapist, your own self, and go, I didn't even see that that was what I was upset about. I didn't even see that that was causing me so much stress. But the entire time I was at therapy, I couldn't shut up about this one thing. Okay, that's the thing I need to go after. That's the thing I need to resolve. And it's mostly just putting the pressure back on your own self to go, I know myself better than the therapist. And this is kind of, I mean, I don't want to go too far into this side of it, but this is how I approach, like if I need to go to the doctor, they only can see a sliver of your life and they're doing the best they can with just, the 20-minute interview that they have with you on, hey, what's your health issues? You're with you all day long. So seeing them as a sounding board, I'm a paid sounding board where you can consistently go to bring up the darkness with no shame, no judgment, none of that like fear of, oh my gosh, I'm going to sound like a crazy person when I share all this stuff. There's none of that. It's a judgment-free zone. That to me is where the massive value of therapy is. And I think everyone should go to therapy for that purpose alone. But if you're going to be like, okay, I'm going to sit here, I'm not going to engage, you're going to have to shake me by my ankles to see if anything valuable comes out, or I'll just sit here and you talk the whole time. And you better come up with something that is amazing and mind blowing. And then I'll be motivated to do something. You're just not going to get any value out of it. You have to be such a participant and be ready for that. And I would even say, give yourself the ability to go, show up. I wasn't comfortable sharing anything. Okay, great. Go 20 more times. Start putting a goal on it where you're like, I'm not even feeling comfortable enough sharing anything. Side note to that, there's two things going on there. Yes, you, your own self, need to be responsible to make sure that you're getting your information out. Also, it is okay to switch therapists. Like you can cycle through a lot. If you're feeling like you are not hitting with a therapist where you feel like you can get all of that information out freely, switch. There's a lot of companies online where you're able to quickly switch. I love these new online companies. That, by the way, I would say, channel change a little bit. The fact that you can get therapy online, like, that is such a huge thing to be able to like cycle through the people that are not necessarily in your neighborhood. That change, that new thing in the therapy arena is gold. So I only see better things coming. But if you really want to get value out of therapy, you, your own self, have to be the one to take the initiative to get something out of it, just as if you would go to a doctor. Do your homework.
Yeah, for sure. And jumping to this next question here about trauma, any advice, I know you're not like a mental health professional, as they would say. I mean, it's good that we make the, separation between, hey, like this is just psychology stuff we're talking about here.
Yeah, I'm not a
and
doctor.
actual mental health professional. So there is a separation. Like
Right.
Go to your mental health professional if you are having that trouble. And I know cost might be an issue for some people. Some of the online ones can be a little cheaper. And if they're not, like, oh man, like, yeah, do use your friends in that case. Like if that's,
Yes.
that is okay too. Just like when you are moving into another position where you can't afford it or someone
Right.
can pay for you, which is another option,
For sure.
then yeah, definitely use your friends. So if friends, family, any advice for people with trauma or ACEs? I do shout out to Cherie for bringing that up to Dave, at least the adverse childhood experiences.
Yes. Right.
She was doing some like studying at school about that. And yeah, it's a very interesting thing that they have now described. It's called adverse childhood experiences, and you can count.
I know what it is.
Like
I just
0 to
forget.
10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just forget like the sensory.
They're different. Like it asks you like certain. Like, did you experience this? Like, did you experience like domestic abuse? Did your parents like divorce or something? Maybe that's one of them. I don't know. But there's like different ones where like the child goes through a lot during childhood potentially.
Right.
And depending on that, like these are things that carry on with you through adulthood.
Absolutely.
And then how many things you start blaming other people when in reality it's just that you have unresolved trauma at the root. So I guess that question is like, any advice for people who are working through that?
Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out. I'm not a doctor, so every single thing that I'm saying is based on my own personal experiences, getting through all this stuff. So I don't have any like license to tell you what to do or not to do. The thing about trauma, and I mentioned this in the consciousness live show. The biggest thing that happens to the human, and this happens a lot in your hippocampus, your amygdala, where your brain is receiving information and then it's telling you what's a threat, what's not a threat, right? So if you're receiving a lot of information coming in as you're growing up and it's hitting that amygdala and hitting that hippocampus, it's shrinking its ability to have confidence to be able to conquer the next mountain, right? So if you're having all of these things in your past that hit, and then you get a loss out of it, creates a trauma. It's like a scar on your brain, scar on your heart, or whatever, where this event happens, and then you get a loss out of it. You don't get stronger because of it. You don't get a win because of it. You get a loss out of it. And when that happens, it's teaching your brain. It's literally storing the information in your brain to say, don't go do that. Not only don't go do that, but also the world is, it's like starts building worldviews where you're like, the world is unfair because these things are happening outside in the outside world. It's just training your brain, right? And we train our brain with so many things, and that's just one of many things that will happen is you get a negative interaction and it trains yourself and what you can accomplish, what you can't accomplish. It's like the thing that we were talking about earlier before we went live of like the elephant, where you're a baby elephant and you're tied to, I think Tony Robbins uses this example where you're tied to a rope, and the brain is what gets hit. Like, oh, I can't pull away from this rope. I am stuck here. And the funny thing is the elephant will get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and absolutely can yank that rope and run away. But your brain has told you you can't, and don't retest that boundary.
Yeah,
So
learned helplessness, right?
learn helplessness. Exactly that. So you have to be able to get to the point where you are going back to each one. I see them as cancer. I see it as like a spot of cancer where it's sitting there and it's percolating and it's causing other problems because it's not being dealt with. It's like a darkness. And if you go into each one of these areas and I don't know if it's re-experiencing them or really going through the event in some way, some simulated way, to where you are breaking free of that stuckness, to where you are conquering it, to where you are seeing yourself as empowered because of the event. Mentally, it's a lot of work, and it's not like you can just go and, visit that event one time and resolve it. Some of these take a lot of work, which is why it would be good to have a therapist to go through it, or a friend that understands you, that is really good at being able to be honest with you and communicate with you. If you can, or even doing it for your own self. Like I did a lot by my own self of going back into the darkness and just staring at these events that would keep coming up. And one of the markers that I would use was, if I would go, you're getting to know somebody and you're like, oh, you don't truly know me until you know the back history. And let me tell you about my parental stuff. And let me tell you about, my religious stuff. Let me tell you about all these events in my past. If I can tell you all the trauma or the negative things in my past, then you actually know me. And I realized there was a lot of stories from my past that I would still tell in anger. I would still tell with hurt. And it was a really good marker for me to see I was not resolved on this thing, because it could still affect me to this day. And this could be something that happened as I was 2 years old, 5 years old, 7 years old, all these issues that had happened as a kid, that if I were to talk about them or explain anything relating to them, then I would get mad or hurt or upset. And therefore that was a trigger for my own self to be like, whoa, I'm really upset about this. I'm obviously not free of that rope from my past. And therefore it was something that I would just obsess about and focus on until I could get myself to where I was free. I had a lot of bitterness at my dad growing up. He was a very intense, aggressive dude. His type is just a very, very intense, aggressive person. And so I felt very stuck, very not free, very not allowed, because I actually wasn't growing up. And that transfers into how you view relationships. That transfers into how you view the world. Am I actually allowed, or am I under these very aggressive OI constraints? And it just so happened that my functions were different from my dad's. He's still TE, but his OI was so intense. So I had to go back through a lot of that and be like, I am allowed, and I am also allowed to plan, and having to resolve so many of those things to where I don't feel free. Now I have only positivity when I think about my dad, even though I still don't want to go hang out with the guy, but I'm like, oh yeah, he was just a kid, mentally a kid. And I have zero over, as an EJ, it's funny that another EJ made me feel, oppressed. I don't see that at all. I just see him as like some kid that's still working on his stuff. Zero of the same feelings that I felt growing up, where I felt trapped, where I felt oppressed. None of that. It's all 100% gone. And a lot of it was just going into the past. First of all, seeing I was upset by it. A lot of that was just going through and writing all my stuff down, talking it out, whatever it was. Like error logs is the exact same process that I would use for resolving the past. So you have error logs for the future, error logs for the past, and you're resolving trauma for the past. And I just kept going after it until I couldn't cry anymore thinking about it, because it was just like, oh, there's nothing here. There's nothing here. There's no cancer. There's no darkness, because I have resolved this. And knowing that, I think what's helpful about the ACEs and stuff like that is that knowing that all of those things intensely affect everything from here on out. If you have an alcoholic parent, the amount that you have a lot of associations with that become negative to alcohol in general, negative to the types of behavior. Anytime you see somebody that reminds you of that type of behavior, the amount of like chemicals that it drums up and toxic negativity that it will drum up for you, that you're sitting with every day, all the time, because of these events in the past, And that may or may not be true with the current event that you're experiencing. There might be nothing going on with that event, but because it is a trigger, it's connected to something that has caused you a lot of pain in the past. It then stops you from being able to objectively see what's going on in the current reality. And therefore, you will start creating those kinds of experiences for yourself. You'll either create more negativity based on a relationship. You'll create more negativity on, I can't do a job like this. I can't. And the problem with all these traumas from the past, again, it'll be you're teaching yourself to move away from challenges. And the problem with that is that when you get backed into a corner, you now are in so much pain, so much more pain than if you could push through it. It's important that you're seeing these negativities and seeing these darknesses and seeing these as challenges to growth mindset, push through to the other side. And it's only once you've practiced pushing through to the other side and getting that win that you're building back up your hippocampus. And that became the most critical thing for me. When I went through deep, dark depression, it was only a game of how do I turn up the volume a teensy, like 0.0001%, and give my hippocampus a boost. That's what it becomes, because it's a game of teaching yourself that you can jump, you can take a leap, you can push through this thing to get to higher elevations of joy. And if you're not aware of all the trauma from the past that is creating new reactions for you, you have no idea what's tripping you up. So it's important to go back through all of those things. And if need be, absolutely use a therapist, use journaling, and talk stuff out. I did a lot of audios for myself. Like I even one time I was going to do therapy, and it was like 3 a.m. I was really upset, and it was 3 a.m. And of course you can't do therapy at 3 a.m. So I did an audio for myself, and I talked out everything that I would have said to the therapist. And I didn't end up signing up at that time, but I gave myself everything I needed to know. And I did that. And because that worked so well, I just kept doing stuff like that, where I'm like, you have so much of this stuff in you, but it's in here. It becomes a very different language once it's outside of your head. And it's almost like hearing it for the first time, because a lot of times we'll get stuck in these reoccurring loops inside of our mind where you're just repeating stuff and you're repeating the same negative cycle. Once you have to tell a story, once it's outside of your head where you're either writing it out or you're speaking it out, it's almost like you can hear it as if a friend were saying it to you.
Yeah.
So that helps.
And it does seem like this is one of those topics we could probably do an entire podcast.
There you go.
that would be a whole thing. And
yes, very good.
Just to say I haven't pulled up all the stats on it, but as far as the ACEs go, if you have a certain number, like a high number of childhood trauma, your lifespan, according to the data, now I don't know, do your own research there, but I'm just a guy on YouTube at this point. So but if you have a certain number of childhood trauma, like high amount, your lifespan reduces by about 20 years.
Oh yeah. Cortisol just killing you. Yeah, absolutely.
So this is not a joke. And, I'm just blockheading the NF because it's like, why are we in this?
Yes.
Shan, TESE, Habib, if you don't know, SETE.
Yes.
I put my name as Habib today instead of the full type. But yeah, there's a practical reason also for digging into all this NF, the NF root of the issues. And
really good. Yes, so, very true.
Before I take a restroom break, I want to ask you a question similar to how I did with Dave. Where is psychology today, and how do you see objective personality fitting in with the rest of that field in particular? Yeah, I know OP is applicable to everything, but as far as psychology goes, how are you seeing psychology, what psychology is missing, and then why OP is actually part of it,
Yeah, if I could give the NI, I just see psychology as dealing with the leaves instead of the roots. And that's the biggest problem. Are you taking a break, Habib, or did your camera go out? Did I miss something there? There you are.
Yeah, I'm taking a break. So
do you want me to answer that while you're gone?
Yeah. Answer that question, maybe expand on, I know the NI of it.
Okay.
But then also kind of, where do you see kind of voids, kind of responsibility talk, where are things kind of being missed in
Yeah.
terms of like, hey, like, why are we having to learn about 11 fucking coins, you know, to like, because honestly, like, hey, people are spending a lot of time learning the system,
Yeah.
and like, why, like, why is that a way? Like, what is this doing? What is this theory doing?
Yeah.
That all
Right.
the theories out there are not, you know, can't hold a
Yeah. What
candle
is the
to it or
why?
whatever.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
why did we need to go this far? What does this like entire theory do for this field?
Right.
Why did Jung study this? Like,
Right.
why was he so popular? Why
Right.
is this so popular? What is this doing that, you know, you can't find in other places? That's,
Okay.
and I
Really
will
good.
go ahead and take a break.
Okay. I'll take it from here. Yeah, absolutely. The thing that I'm seeing that, again, like I'll start over again. It's the psychology seems to be looking at the leaves. So if you're looking at the leaves, you're coming up with solutions for very behavioral stuff. So a lot of it is like, if behavior is this, then this is how we treat the behavior. And the deepest it goes is seeing that there are some kinds of psychological, behaviors. You could, if I can figure out that somebody has sociopathic tendencies or psychopathic tendencies or narcissistic tendencies or something along those lines, or ADD or ADHD or anything like that, then if if I can qualify or quantify the behavior and see that this is a recurring behavior to some degree, that there is a pattern to some degree here, then I can learn to treat that, then I can learn to help. And the problem with that is that if you don't get to the root of where the information is coming from and you know get an accurate reading on where the information is coming from, then you're going to consistently be treating symptoms. You're going to always be treating symptoms, and therefore you're never getting like the cancer out, the root. And the thing with, Dave and I just went after the brain of like, what is the brain actually sending signals? What are the signals that the brain is sending, and trying to get deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. Because we started off with where everybody else was at, in this day and age where you have the cognitive functions, you have Myers-Briggs, and why what is deeper than that? Why is it that there's a feeler and a thinker, and where does that even stem from? And if I know this information, does it help? And then also, is it that I do my opposites? Is that I have to do my demons? Is that I have to do my saviors? Okay, great. What is the meaning of life? And the more that you can get to the core of where the actual root of these problems are happening, then you can start getting some success. If you don't realize that, then you're just going to be thinking that something is wrong. What's interesting to me, because like psychology does the same thing as parents do to their own kids, teachers do to their own kids. The amount of times I would hear from teachers that boys do this and girls do that, like, oh, boys are just not as detailed as girls are, and girls are more detailed with stuff, and boys aren't as responsible as girls are. Like, I heard that from teachers all the time, and then they would project that onto my kid. And I'm like, you're missing it. It's not all boys do XYZ. It's not all girls do XYZ. It's that my kid doesn't have SI and you do. So you're lumping in your experiences and projecting that onto categories that aren't at the root of where the problem is. And therefore, it's like it's trying to diagnose a disease and just slapping at the symptoms. Have you ever seen? If you haven't, there is a series called House. It was very well known back in the day. And it's funny, it's the most repetitive series you could ever imagine. Like, you can literally clock it to where they figure out the diagnosis at minute 35, just in case you're wondering. Every single time they figure out the diagnosis at minute 35. And then they try a whole bunch of different diagnoses before they get there. Yes, I love House too. So you have them slapping because of the symptoms. And it's like, oh, the symptoms, So they're like, throw this drug at it, throw this drug at it, that drug's killing them, So that was the game. The game was, let's any guess and throw a bunch of different guesses at this sickness and hope we make it until it reveals itself so much later on. So it's not that psychology today can't eventually get a diagnosis, but the amount that they're not tracking. What if I'm Savior Lupus?
Oh my God,
Okay,
it's always
I got my
lupus.
F5. That was
No,
pretty.
it's never
Good.
lupus. Oh my
It's
God.
never lupus. Yeah, that's what Mal says. It's never lupus.
Yeah.
So, and then like the other one always says it's lupus. It's like it's never lupus. So that's how I see psychology today, is that they're just very much in the dark. It's never lupus. Yes, it's never lupus. That's
Get some
good.
play energy in here for a
Yes,
second. No, it's okay.
I got
We'll
my
do
own
more at the
vibe.
end. We'll do.
Yes,
Yeah,
very
yeah.
much
It's good.
so. So that's what I see psychology doing, is they're like, try this, try this, try this, try this, try this, because they don't have what the actual brain wiring is doing. If you actually have the brain wiring, then you can now compare life experiences to the brain wiring. You're like, okay, that's how that trauma got affected because of your brain wiring. It's not, hey, the root is this trauma, and unfortunately that event happened to you, so we can never resolve that trauma because it happened and we can never go back from that. So why are you still doing this behavior years later? If you don't know the root of the cause, you can't correctly treat the root, you know? And if I don't know, like that's what was interesting for me about knowing that I was a number one. It was another puzzle piece to the core of my actual parts, and therefore knowing these things then allows me to treat the actual cause of it. Oh, I am a number one, but my functions contradict that. Therefore, if I'm not aware of that, all of my behaviors are causing even more problems. Instead of knowing my coins, knowing my wiring, knowing all of that stuff, then now you can treat the actual disease, which is why we call it the disease, your saviors and your demons, you know? It's like, it is what it is. It's something that you're given. So it's not necessarily a disease, but it definitely can cause a lot of problems and trauma. And if you go straight to it, you can really resolve a lot. So in my opinion, in fact, we do have, there's a lot of people that are in our class that will email us and stuff like that are psychologists that use this in their practice, where they just use different wording. They're not saying savior and demon to the person, but they are specifically using the information and helping people out. We had one guy that was back in the early days where he was like just extremely actively helping people with using the saviors and demons, using the functions. And he said, he was reporting back. He's like, I've never had this kind of success with people that I had in the past, because if you know that they're a decider, or that they're an observer, like the amount you're like, oh, okay, we weren't even speaking the same language. I had no idea we weren't speaking the same language. Now I can actually resolve the issue here, instead of thinking that they're not really upset about that thing. You can't really be upset about that because that doesn't bother me. So let me go after this one area over here, and totally missing it. So if it's like having a very, very critical tool to be able to go straight to where all the problems are coming from. I think that will eventually, I think it'll take many, many years for it to start seeping into psychology, but it's one of those things where it'll come through social media, and then the next layer of people and kids will be trained up through social media on how to get after their savior functions. It's because, look, stuff doesn't stick around if it doesn't work. It just doesn't. It doesn't stick around if it doesn't work. So if op is actually working, that just keeps going. You have a friend going, oh my gosh, this helped me. Another friend, like all the stuff keeps helping and building and helping and building and helping and building. And therefore you start spreading that around. That's how word gets out. It's not going to be anything that we say or do. It'll be, does it actually work or not? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm early into the game of the coaching thing that I'm doing. I'll leave some links in the description. That's my self-promotion.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is helping people, is like what I'm seeing is
right.
People are getting unstuck at the root problem. They have their saviors and demons, but also like understanding it for yourself is freeing on another level. Mm-hmm. So it's one thing. It's great to see that, a psychologist, someone can use this, but definitely it's freeing to be able to use it yourself. That's just an extra layer of power.
For sure.
But also I know someone uses it in personal training in that
really?
context.
That's smart.
Sam, SEFE. Yeah.
That's so smart.
He's crushing it there. And just telling people, it's so powerful in just working with people in general. And it's not going to stick around unless it's actually working for
Yeah.
sure. And
Yeah.
I'm very excited to see the future of this. But yeah, that was the field of I mean, the field of psychology. Um, and yeah, I'm glad you mentioned like client success and stuff with that. Um, so moving on, the Shan's journey is the next topic. Is kind of like your personal journey in terms of like let's say your health. So that's more like the SFST question of like how, you've had like some health issues here and there. I know,
Mhm.
you don't have to share anything you don't want to, but in terms of like how has kind of how are you kind of moving through like your personal health journey,
Mm.
as there are struggles there, and yeah, this is more of a personal question. It actually has less to do with
Yeah,
op in a way.
that's
It's
fine.
just
Yeah,
a personal
it's
question.
like
Yeah.
the pragmatic use of how
Yeah.
I've done this over time. Sure, I can
Yeah.
definitely talk about that. Yeah, I think like everyone, I had a string of random things that would happen. I see a lot of people that have like digestive issues, and I had a lot of digestive issues for a while. My kidneys were shutting down, even though I've never had any. I didn't do drugs, don't drink, don't smoke, that kind of thing. But I had so much stress in the early years of op. Like again, just Dave and I being, you know, very opposites, extreme amount of stress. So my body would shut down. And then just over the course of the years, there was quite a few things that would happen. Just like I like so body shutting down, kidney issues, had to figure that out. Um, I got vertigo at one point, had to figure that out. And then I had a major neck injury that then like tore muscles in my whole shoulder. That one was a pretty huge event, that I had to resolve. So like those were kind of like, and then miscarriage. I had a miscarriage, quite a few years ago. Before Cody was born, obviously. So these kinds of health things. The first one, I didn't know anything about op. So the miscarriage, I didn't know anything about op. But that was a huge one because I was bleeding out for the course of 4 days. I was dying, basically dying. Just it was bad, really, really bad. And that was a pretty huge marker in my life, because it like you go into a relationship thinking like, okay, my partner's going to be there for me when I'm down, and my partner started losing it. So he was like in the corner feeling sad for his own self instead of like doing something and helping me through it. And that was a big one at the time. I remember being like, oh, if I'm going through something, I'm alone. I am absolutely alone. So that was really hard to go through that and then feel alone. And that was a pretty big like, oh, okay, I don't think I want to stay married to this person, because if I'm dying or if I'm out, you're in the other room crying for yourself instead of calling the fucking ambulance. Like I'm like in the bathtub filled with my own, stuff, and going, barely able to talk, saying, call my mom. He calls my mom, and mom's like, what are you doing? Get her to the hospital. Like it was just one of those things where you're like, okay, life-changing moment. So going through that, um, it was a pivotal moment where like I was like, okay, if I don't actively help my own self with my health, I'm not gonna make it. Even that, by day 4, when I was in the hospital second time, they did a surgery on me, a DNC, but they didn't put blood in me, and I had lost so much blood over the last few days, so I almost didn't wake up from the surgery. And um, luckily, like I was waking up, and the nurse comes in, and I'm like, I'm not gonna wake up. I'm not waking up. Like I'm like telling her as I'm like going in and out, like not waking up. I'm like, I'm not waking up. This isn't going well. I'm not doing okay. And she
Mm.
looked at my vitals and was like, oh my gosh. And she just like ran out of the room. I'm like, well, there you go. And she put two bags of blood in me, and I made it, luckily. But like how crazy that is, that you're like having to take action to save your own life, but mentally that set me up. So I'm like, okay, I could blame whoever I want to blame, but it's really only me that is going to choose to survive or not. So the gut issues, mostly it was stress. It was mostly just my whole body was filling with with cortisol and adrenaline. I was
Let me
having,
just pause here and say
yes, yes.
thank you. I'm glad you're still here. I'm glad that nurse
Right,
did
right, right.
what she did, and
Right.
Thank you for sharing everything
Yeah.
you've been sharing.
Yes,
I know
yes,
it's
yes.
like vulnerability, and like I totally want to jump in and say some effy stuff here, but like, I thought it's a little bit poetic for me to even just listen, because
Yeah, right, right.
there's a double entendre there of like, if I don't say anything, that's kind of rehashing the story
Oh, I
in
don't
a
have
way
any
of like,
sadness anymore about it, but thank you. Yeah.
no, I mean
Yeah.
like just you telling the story without any interruption. That is what the story is
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
no one was there. It's
Right,
like,
right.
hey, like, what's the, if I interrupt, say like, oh, it's like, what, this is what people need to hear, and this is what
Yeah.
people are going through, and it really can
Right.
get that bad. Like, and if you haven't gone through it, you know what, like, good for you if you haven't gone
Right.
through this kind of stuff, but like someday you might. And this is the kind of stuff that Shan has been through, and
Right.
that she's still here with us today. That's
Yeah.
awesome. That's great.
Like it's good to
And
connect.
be
Like,
prepared.
hey, you're
Yeah.
not alone. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, you're not alone. The biggest part about the miscarriage was, I'm like I'm a double observer. So the hardest part about it was the aftermath. It took me, I don't know, maybe a whole year. But I never got to see the baby. So there was like not any sensory of like I saw the baby and then it died and it was completed. So my brain did like I was never pregnant. Maybe I was never pregnant. Maybe I was never pregnant. Maybe I was never pregnant. I spun in that for a really long time. Like I was in a very like dark space of I made it all up. It was in my head. You get to the point where you go through such a weird trauma, and that if you don't have like a completion feeling, like it was like my whole body was geared up to make this baby. And then you have all the chemicals that are like, okay, make the baby happen. And then when that like turned off, that was a pretty intense year of like going, hey, it's okay. You did have a baby. It happened. Like how strange that the brain does that. But it was just a practice in getting my mind to be able to go through something hard. I think a lot of people will go through something and be like, am I alone? Is this something that other people are going through? Why am I feeling crazy? And if I had at the time, if I had gone to a therapist and talked it out, I probably would have gotten to the resolving of that trauma much faster, because that's what a therapist does. They help you go through, let's talk this out. And I blasted it by myself. You're scared to tell anybody about those kinds of thoughts at the time, because you're like, I'm sounding crazy. Don't say this out loud. But that was something that I went through. And the mental side, you think, okay, the physical side, but you're like, well, that was 4 days. And luckily I made it. But the mental side was what really gets you month after month after month, the trauma that happens to the brain. But making it through that definitely got the confidence of like, okay, it's on me. And then the digestive thing, that was something that I see so many people dealing with. And it's one of those things where you're like, how do I even resolve something like this? Because it feels like everything that you're trying is messing it up. At the time, I finally realized why it started. When I was pregnant with Cody, they gave me so many antibiotics for stuff. Like at one point they were just giving me antibiotics on top of antibiotics on top of antibiotics. So it just shot my whole system. So that's how it started. And then from there, the anxiety and the cortisol that I would have pumping through my system because of the fighting between Dave and I, it was that just absolutely, just it like created years of problems that I then had to like figure out how to resolve. And most of it was just like, yeah, you gotta actually balance this thing called your gut, and that just took years. And now they have so much information about that, but at the time they didn't. So taking on the mental of I'm responsible. This is only going to get resolved if I resolve it. Because at the time, even doctors were like, there's no such thing as candida. Like if you go to the doctor back in the day, they're like, that's just a myth. And now obviously they know all about it. But, at the time it wasn't, it was seen as a urban myth. So when you can go through all of these things and just decide that you're going to resolve it, that's when you start getting through. So at the time I made a log for myself. I logged everything that I was eating. I pared my diet all the way down to stuff that was only going to be gut healthy. And that did a lot of work. I like healed my kidneys, healed all these problems that I was having for years, but I still had to heal the mental side of it. I had to heal the panic attacks, and that took a few years to resolve stuff between Dave and I. Like the mental side of stuff took even longer than just, paring down my diet. But I think more than anything, it was just choosing, I am going to resolve this. And like one thing I learned like the practice of how to solve stuff. I learned how to search Google. It's almost like, which prompts do you give Chat GPT? Like figuring out that game made a huge difference, where I would start searching, I healed my kidneys. I cured my impossible to cure kidneys. Like I started searching for things that were very, I was looking for the fringe people that were like, I solved this and here's how I solved it, instead of just the general, let me go to WebMD and freak myself out. Like I knew that wasn't going to be successful. So that's how I got a lot of my stuff resolved, was by actually going, let me find the people who have won. Let me find the people that resolved this. I'll give one more story. I one morning in the middle of the night, I woke up and I started just throwing up and it was like, what is going on? And I couldn't, the whole world was spinning. Everything was dizzy and spinning. And it turned out I had vertigo, which I didn't know what vertigo was. I kind of like vaguely had heard about vertigo, but every single time I turned my head, even one slight, like just slightly to the left, I would throw up. So as you can imagine, very quickly you die if you keep throwing up that much. Like it was just constant all the time, And I learned very quickly the game, because I had already learned the game of, you go to the internet and you ask, how do I resolve vertigo? And it turned out that I found this video on, there's like a method where you can turn your head certain ways, because basically what happens is a calcium gets dislodged in your eardrum, which throws off your entire balance, which makes you feel like you're on a boat and throwing up, right? And I watched that video and I did the procedure and I completely cured myself. So it was like one of those situations where I was like, I'm not even going to make it to the hospital. I need to do this now. Let's resolve this. And also, what are they going to tell me at the hospital? I'm so thankful for YouTube. So thankful for Google because I absolutely was able to quickly do that method and then get free within 24 hours. Like it was intense, but it was just it became a very positive experience where I feel like I got free because of this thing, instead of, I'm scared. What if that happens again? Like the method of how to get out. And same thing with all of the digestive stuff. The method of how to get out became something that was very freeing for me. I love going to the doctor, but I like knowing what I'm dealing with so that I have information to be able to give to them. I don't want to just show up and be like, you're 110% responsible. Find the missing information. Like I need to be able to own this stuff my own self in case something happens, in case even in the sight of doctors, they don't know what to do, So that became kind of a running theme for me, where I took my health into my own hands and then went to the doctors once I was able to dial in and be like, here's my problem. Can you help me with this? So again, my story is not for everybody. If you're having health issues, please go, talk to health professionals. Don't just take what I did and assume that that's going to work for you as well. But I still think taking personal responsibility and you diving into your own self, creating logs, do whatever you need to, start training yourself and tracking all that stuff, then you're going to be able to help your doctor more, because they're not magicians, So there's my health journey.
That's amazing. And like for me, some of the subtext, there's a lot there, but of everything you're sharing is that, here you have a TESE play first. It feels very similar to my own stories, right, of like SETE, where this double extrovert, in terms of the functions at least, right?
Right.
The functions are extroverted and the play first, right? So the resolving is inside. The resolving is like inner, like we have to choose, that's our story. But if you're a sleep first person watching this being like, what the hell are these people talking about?
Yeah, right.
It's a different journey for every person. Like, and that's like the common thread is like, you acted like a sleep first of like, hey, right, let me decide, let me put my NI somewhere of like, what does resolved look like?
Yes.
What if I'm the only one in the room? What if the person I love the most isn't there for me?
Totally.
I've gone through that as well. It's,
yes.
it can feel lonely, but at the same time, if you're able to conquer it, if
Very
you're able
much.
to have the courage, then on the other side of that is so much more freedom and
Yes.
power and all that.
Yeah, that's so
Yeah.
true. My story is exactly that because technically my brain says the doctors know more than I do. And so if I show up and they don't know the information, then I feel stuck. And that's exactly my story is like, hey, absolutely, obviously, default, listen to your doctor. But when your doctor leaves the room and you're dying, do something about it. Protect yourself. When you can't DE, rely on your tribe, you're going to have to do something for yourself. 1,000%. That is definitely my story. Hey, learn to do your demons.
Yeah, yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm just gonna move on to the next section of family slash parenting and op.
Yeah.
But before we get into parenting, there's a family side of it. I know you have a family of origin, right? And you
Yeah.
have
I was
siblings. How
born.
many siblings do you have total?
Two.
It's like
Older brother, younger
two.
sister. Yeah. I'm a middle child.
Yeah, and I know there's like videos you guys have on your website, some things like, well, things about family, etc., and
Yeah.
other people who, let's say you're in a position in life where you've found something and other people are not quite on board with that. Let's just put
Right.
it that way,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Like as you're going through life and you're conquering certain things or you're finding out certain things about yourself and your path, like do you feel like you're kind of losing people in your life? You're not able to go to people that you used to be able to go to, and does
Right.
that kind of lead to that feeling of like isolation? And yeah,
Right.
how does that go for you, or how
Yeah.
did that go for you? Yeah.
That was hard. For me, it started well. With the break from my family started when I lost Christianity. So it happened when that happened, and it mostly started because I put my foot down and asked my family to schedule a call with me instead of just calling you at whatever times. And my family took that as in their own demon function ways. Like they all thought I was saying something different depending on their demon functions. And most of them are OE. So they were all like, oh my gosh, she's, you know, telling us she doesn't want to talk to us. So it literally lasted like 7 years before my family contacted me. And then like, I think it was my sister that finally started talking to me and asking me how I was doing and hearing about some health concerns at the time. And it was funny, like I was I didn't even want I was like holding my I was at the time very insecure about doing my demon sleep. And so I was like, nope, sticking with my guns. If you guys don't schedule a call, screw you. I guess we're not talking. And it was immature at the time, but I was basically trying to flex my, using my functions. Like I think more than anything, it was during that time period where I had to like really process thinking of my family in one way and seeing them very differently after that. I'm like, okay, I thought my family had my back with no matter what, and of course they would never leave me. And like, okay, what? Like 7 years of not talking to my family. But like the thing was, at the time, I had a baby, I had a newborn, and I'm like, my mom would call at like 6 in the morning, and I'm like, okay, you got to stop doing that. And my brother would just call randomly, and then he was asleep last ENTP, so he would want to talk for 3 hours. And it got to the point where my whole life became about just randomly answering these calls from family, and that was what my life was about as a lead play. you know okay, I guess we're doing this right now. I guess I'm just randomly, and like my ex-husband would randomly call in and want to do FaceTime right then with my toddler. And it was just one of those things where it was like, okay, I need to make my life be about something. I don't want to just be at the whim of my entire family where my whole life is just randomly lead play serving somebody else's needs. So I was like, hey, I'd love to talk to you guys every single day, but can you at least send me an email and say, hey, actually, can I talk to you at 2? Like, and that was just a giant insult. And it was hard enough for me to say, can we do that? Because I'm Demon OI and I'm Demon Blast. It was very difficult for me to even, you know, initiate something like that with my family. And all of them just left me for dead for years. And it was so hard. I'm like, that's it. I asked everybody to do their demon functions and everyone just left me for dead for years. So it was like it was one of those things where I was like embarrassed to do it, felt strong that I did it, and then happy that I did it because, to be honest with you, I finally had some peace. I wasn't waking up at 6 a.m. just because my ex-husband wanted to go FaceTime with my kid. Like, it was just a nightmare, and I didn't realize how much that's what my life was about. And then also very weird to then go through the process of seeing my family in a very different light of like, okay, they're willing to literally not talk to me ever just because they didn't want to send an email that says, I'll talk to you at 2, So it was kind of realizing like, oh, I didn't have as intense a bond with my family as I thought I did. I didn't realize that that wasn't as important to them as it was to me. Like, that was one of the things, realizing, oh, we are just monkeys in a tribe. We're not like some blood, oh my God, family is deeper than whatever. Like, I thought that I had a very intense, like, oh, well, you just don't know my family. You just don't know my family. My family's amazing. If you have problems with your family, that's not my family. My family, we would always have each other back. So to watch that happen over something that small was like, it was a part of like understanding op, of realizing how intense people's savior functions are, just like dictate their life. That like not even my own mom was allowed to blast and contact her daughter because, I don't want to offend the tribe. Like, it was so weird to watch somebody like go those many years and be like, well, you said this. And it's like, what? That stopped somebody from connecting. And so it was more a process of letting go of the worldviews that I had, of like this deep emotional family means everything in their life, and you are only in existence because of family. So that was hard. That was really difficult for me to let that go. And then also coming back around and loving them because they were just like me, victims of their demon functions. Because of course my mom wanted to talk to me. Of course she wanted me in her life. Of course, but her demon functions, their demon functions, they were not allowed. And so it was very interesting kind of being able to process that in a way where I was initially pissed off and hurt and angry that I even had to do my demon functions, that people were taking advantage of me, and that they reacted so violently to me putting my foot down and setting boundaries. Like, setting boundaries is the most difficult thing for demon sleep. And I have demon sleep and demon function sleep. It is the most difficult thing to set boundaries. So the second I do it, everyone just splits. Like, that was very emotionally. And then I'm realizing I need to have empathy and love them, because this is something that is just impossible for them to do, because it's their demon functions. It's not they don't love you. It's that people are driven by this. It's their everything. So
Yeah.
letting them go was more, and we've come back around. I talk to my mom. Well, now I talk to my mom once a month, because we just, like, she's got her life. I've got my life. I talk to my sister pretty consistently as well. I haven't talked to my brother for a while, and I don't talk to my dad, but like, I love my family. I think they're great. I feel bad that they don't use the functions to resolve a lot of their stuff. My sister's kind of coming around a little bit. She's like wanting to hear more and wanting to like, hey, tell me about, she'll speak the language with me. She's like, my FE does this. So she'll speak the language with me a little bit, and is getting success out of that, understanding that part of herself. But it is weird to watch your family be like, oh my gosh, this problem. And I'm like, yeah, that's what everybody says of your type. But you just love them and empathize with them, and then let them be, because they have to be actively seeking if they want to, actually, a lot of times people don't really want to resolve that issue, because that issue is what gets them, moving through the day. Yeah.
And the boundaries thing is a big thing for
Yeah.
this, and learning how to place boundaries. And then also, like, for me, like, looking back at the way I'm trying to place boundaries, I'm like, oh, that was a weird way I did it.
Right.
But like,
Right. Awkward. I was awkward. Yeah.
Coming back and be like, you know what? I know I did it weird, but couldn't you just like love me and
Thank you.
enough to like
Yeah.
understand that that's a hard thing for me to do, but
Right.
like, there's no, it's like you say, like, people having to do their demons to have that exercise additional compassion for someone. And it's also like with the play energy, we're allowing people to feel like to feel a version of us.
Yeah.
And they don't want to change that, because they have us, sleep processed in a certain version of
Very much so.
ourselves. And so
Yes.
when we make that sleep adjustment, when a play savior person does some sleep processing,
It's
then
like,
everyone else is forced to update who the hell this play person is.
exactly.
And that's hard. That's work.
Yes,
That's work for
exactly.
them to do, to maintain the connection in the
Wakes
way
them
that it's
up.
been. Yeah.
Yeah, very
And
true.
then you really see. And yeah, I'll say there's a little bit of flex things there too. I noticed,
Yes. Yes.
I have a Calendly link that I sent to some friends, and then I got a little bit of pushback from that
Right, right.
because they're like, why the hell are you having me sign up for
Yeah.
this calendar link? And I'm
Yeah.
like, oh shit, like you don't
Yeah.
value your time.
Right, right.
In that way, like it's like, hey, can I go through a back door? Like it's,
Right.
and I asked my wife about this, who's like, I think a number four, and she's
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's a little impersonal. And I'm like, oh
Right.
shit, like tell me more. And
Right.
that's, yeah. Just for those
All
listening
of
who are on the
that.
flex side, like, do understand there's another equation. The flex people are trying to do something with their time, and
Right.
they're
That.
really weird. We're really weird about it, honestly.
Yes.
I see
Yes.
someone in the comments saying something about family time schedule. What the hell are you talking about? But like,
Oh, what kind of freak
that's like a
schedules a
friend's
family phone
energy.
call?
Yeah, that's a
This
friend's
one.
energy thing.
Yeah.
Like people with the savior friends will be pretty confused with
Yeah, they're
this
not going to
idea.
understand. Like, why would you do that? Yeah, I tried
Yeah,
to explain it to my brother at the time when years later, like I finally talked to my brother years later, who is a number four, and he was just like, "What the hell?" Like, I want to be able, and he was like telling me, "I want to be able to call you at all times," and I'm like, "No," and he's like, "But I want that," and I'm like, "I appreciate that you are telling me what your needs are." No, because he's just like, this is how I want to relate to you. And I'm like, yes, but you get on the phone and it's 3 hours of NETI, sleep last, nonstop. What about this person's type? What about this person's type? What about for 3 hours straight? And then I get off and I'm exhausted. I miss dinner. I'm not feeding my kid. Like the amount that it absolutely would fuck me over was a lot. And if I'm going to start taking care of my family, like priorities, like it was one of the
yeah,
things where like I have to prioritize not only
yeah,
my family here, I have a kid I have to now start taking care of, and then it was about op. It became intensely about op. I'm like, you can't. I'm literally on the phone with people, helping them through their trauma. Like back in the day when we were doing phone calls and also doing videos for everybody and audios and answering all these emails. I would have to tell somebody in my community no, because my brother wants to talk on the phone for 3 hours straight randomly, and I'm like, I can't do that anymore. And he just didn't. It like didn't it
yeah.
didn't it didn't make sense to him that I was doing something climbing. He saw it as like, but I'm your family, I'm first. And I'm like, not anymore. I'm sorry. Like my family has expanded to op. Like they are included inside of my family now. And if
There
I'm
you
going to
go.
serve all these people, I have to create a schedule or,
I always,
yeah.
yeah, I'm 100% on board with the way you are right now, and the way I'm starting to be with my coaching clients and that kind of
Right.
thing. And I
Right.
also saw with Jeff Bezos, I always thought it was like a little weird energy he had, but
Yeah.
honestly, just like us, where
Yeah.
he's
Right.
like, I'm maniacally focused on customers. And I'm
Yes.
like,
Right.
dude, what are you doing with these
Right. It's
customers?
not
Like,
friend oriented. Yes.
oh, you're not, you're losing money on this deal? What the hell? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
Right.
he would like take loss. I know eventually worked around to like profit, etc. But like
Yeah.
he like bent over backwards doing like freaking gymnastics to like kind of
Help the customers.
help the
Right.
customers.
Right.
And the person's not lying, and the
Right.
math, the amount of the flex going all the way through the pinball machine
Right. You don't realize
of
that's what
like
the ones are
freaking
doing. Like,
like
obviously, I'm
oh,
helping
flex
people.
responsibility, specialize. Oh, friends, it's time. Oh, who are my
Yeah.
friends? My customers? What the fuck is that?
Right.
And it's
Right.
just like, and it's like, don't tell your customers that, because they're like, oh, that's weird. I'm not inviting
Right.
you over for Thanksgiving. No, but
But everybody wants. Oh,
yeah,
sorry. That's my plant wall. I have it automatically going in the water. You're going to hear water in a second. Um, if I don't, like, there's too many people. There's too many people that want love and connection and to be able to have their personal time. And it's like, okay, cool. Then if that's what you want, I need to put this in a box, which is terrifying for Demon OI. It's like, I have to actually put this in a box so that I can then serve the next person, and then I can serve the next person, then serve the next person. So yeah, as weird as that is, if I don't set something up like that, then I actually can't make the effect that I want to and consistently help as many people as I actually want to. I won't be able to do it if I'm, and that's kind of how I see it. It's like, look, I used to tell this to my sister. I'm like, I could stop on the side of the road and help every single um, homeless cat, which there is a type for that. There is a personality type for that. That's just not me. I would rather build an entire center that then consistently brings in homeless kittens, that then has a whole system to where they're able to thrive and help the overall species problem. I'm not the kind of person that will, and this is so not accurate. I actually would totally pick up a cat on the side of the road. So like,
No, I
this
get where
is
you're getting
very
at.
conceptual, because
Yeah,
I would
yeah.
absolutely bring all 50 of them home if I could. But like conceptually, I care way more about building something large so that I can help the majority,
It's
consistently.
long-term friends. If demons are more long-term, which is what I'm
Yeah.
seeing, it's like,
Yeah.
hey,
Yes.
you're doing friends, but more on a long-term basis. It's like,
Yes.
yeah,
Right.
I have
Exactly. That's it.
yeah, my family's from Bangladesh, and like I'd have some relatives roast me when I first got a job out of college. They're like, "Hey, by the way, set aside a lot of money for
Right.
giving money to the poor in Bangladesh," and I'm like,
Yes. Right.
there's
Right.
something, like
Right.
I have a more longer tail thing I'm
Right.
trying to do
Right.
here. It's like,
Exactly.
hey, what are the 50-year-olds doing in our community, right? Like,
Right.
because that's where I am kind of anchoring my mind of like, when am I going to be super giving? Is when I'm
Right.
50, and
Right.
that's because that way you can amass, however, like let's say millions or something, or
Right. Right.
for
Exactly.
donation, as opposed to giving like $1 here and there, which is super important. It's important at
Yeah.
every level. Just know what your role is, and don't
Right.
like overjudge people for their
Right. That's
role
why
and
you
how they're
see
trying to give.
Jeff
Yeah.
Bezos and Bill Gates doing the philanthropy stuff. It's like, okay, now that I have made billions, let me come back around and give to these specific areas and help those things that, like that's definitely what I would care about doing. It's like, look, I want to make a real difference. I guess that's what it's about. I really want to make a real difference. Let me put pressure on myself now so I can come
Yeah.
back around and make a real difference.
Yeah, and let me just be careful there. Let me just be careful there. Yeah, the real differences are also being made in the short term as well. The number
Of
four,
course, right. I
the
still
random, like
will
the
pick up a cat.
$5
Yeah.
giving a sandwich to a homeless person, like that
Oh
goes a long way.
yeah.
You know
Oh,
what I
I
mean?
love that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
I,
yeah,
I love over tipping. Just be like, here you go, and then the look on their face. Yes, yes.
yeah,
That's like karmic stuff that I enjoy all the time, because if you give somebody, even in the short term, a love, a hug, more money than they ever expected, then you are still creating a butterfly effect. But yeah, as far as scheduling the phone calls, that's definitely why I'm like, yeah, I can't just jump on the phone at any time, because it's not
yeah.
going to positive affect masses. So yeah.
So I had a question here about sharing op with your son.
Oh
Now,
right,
I don't
yeah.
know how far you want to go with this, so like feel free to, cut it wherever you need to.
Okay, yeah, it's
And
2 o'clock now, so let's
yeah,
maybe
start wrapping up.
let's start wrapping up, and then if anybody wants to ask some questions, we can
Yeah,
go with that. So yeah, um,
yeah,
let me hit that one quickly, and then we can answer
sure.
some questions from the community, and then we can get out of here. But as far as sharing it with Cody, what do you mean, like?
I
Um,
mean, like in terms of like using the system, like is he like using the functions, that kind of thing, or like
yeah,
is it maybe too much theory, too much like, hey, like what's the point of this? Like, I'm just wondering because like I imagine a lot of people in the community have children, and it's just like
right,
also like how much do you like kind of cut things off at a certain
right,
point of
right,
like, hey, just be a
yeah,
kid, and that's kind of where
yeah.
my curiosity is.
Honestly,
Yeah.
when you're a parent, and you'll this already, it's like their needs, you're like, okay, what do I do to make their needs get met? Like I'll do whatever it takes. And like for my own self, when I see Cody having an FI problem, I'm like, this is just an FI problem. And for all of our conversations, Cody's 12, all of our conversations would, they have to start, and this is just anybody that I would talk to that's on the outside of knowing their own functions as deeply as I do. Like, you're starting with where they're at. You still have to meet them with where they're at. And just for years, it would always be like, okay, so he's having an FI problem. So instead of telling him when he was younger, it wasn't like, okay, Cody, let me give you a lesson before I give you the information here. You're just trying to get them to a place where they're at peace. And all of the information that I would give him growing up had to do with demon NI and demon FI. So like when he was in a bad state, it was teaching him how to meditate. And one thing that he would do is, I taught him, because a lot of times in the early days, he would get so frustrated really quickly because, the feminine NI and feminine FI was just like a very intense ball of explosive energy all at once. And then he would get real mean and nasty. And it was like, okay, so this is just a bad emotions problem. You're feeling bad emotions. So resolve the bad emotions, and then we can work on how to solve the problem. And so getting him to practice, sit in the middle of your room, meditate for 10 minutes, and go to the depths of inside your own self, find the bad emotion, and talk to yourself about the bad emotion. And he got really good at doing that, and very much would consistently get to where it was like, I would just be like, all right, that's it. Meditate 10 minutes. I'll be back. And I'd leave the room because he would know he was just being a jerk and needed to resolve bad emotions in himself, So there was just that practice. And he would even do the lotus, pose where he would close his eyes and do that. And he just did that trigger to help himself go down and dig and dig and dig and dig. And then, every time I would come in 10 minutes later, he would get his little cries out and be able to tell me exactly what he was FI upset about and just practice that game. Or if he'd done stuff to hurt other people's feelings in the room, I taught him to practice hugging everybody so that we get back on the same NF vibe, and that was a game that he also learned about as well. So over the years, he very much just would be able to speak, okay, I am upset about this, or I'm a decider, so I'm pissed off about the teacher, da, 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 da. So he would start calling it out over time. So he definitely can see his stuff at this point. But all that being said, he's still 12. So the amount, he hasn't gone through like ego death yet, where he's been able to be like, my whole problems that I'm dealing with are because I haven't attacked these things in my life. But he's still using his functions. He's still using his socials even to know how to get himself ultimately out of problems. He's still using those. And I think it's critical to help your kid with consistent methods for being able to solve their problems, And, I'm TE. So I'm like, I don't care what the problem is. I don't care what the solution is. Is this what works for you? Okay. Meditating in the middle of the room. Great. Hugging everybody to get everybody back on NF. Great. That's what worked for him. And I think for me, setting up consistent situations where I would pick him up from school every single day. And that was my 10 minutes of time to be like, deeply tell me how you are. And then I would just wait. And it took a couple months before he felt like he could actually blast and share stuff. But then that trigger became, this is the time when we talk about stuff deeply. So as a parent, what else am I going to do other than go, look, I see a destination that, you're only 12. So you're nowhere near being done with your own bullshit and like actively going after your functions and stuff. He still uses them, but he's not the one necessarily like proactively being like, I'm having a blast issue. Let me get myself moving. But he knows what the problem is. So it's giving him the tools. And then also as a parent, just consistently giving him a space where he can communicate about his own stuff, like pretending like I'm the therapist, like, here's your avenue, talk about whatever you need to talk about today. You need to be able to resolve these issues. So here's your arena. And as hard as it is, the hardest thing for me is I just don't push past where he's at. I can only give little nuggets that are 1% past where he's at, because again, it's back to like the person A, person B thing. If he's not the one leading it, then he doesn't get the win. If I'm the only one riding on him to come on, then he doesn't get that win for himself. Therefore, he's not doing that for himself when he's alone. So I still think he has quite a few years before he's really using op functions for his own self. But there's no way I'm not using this to help my kid. It changes everything, So there's that.
Cool. Yeah. Thank
Great.
you
Want to
for
take some
sharing all
questions
that.
and then
Yeah, we can.
then we can go.
Yeah, let's take some questions.
All right.
All right.
Hi,
So,
everybody.
hey
Play.
everyone. Yeah, I think Riley had one.
Awesome. Hi, Riley.
let me, oh, here you go. Okay, how can you navigate misunderstandings with family members when you don't share the same functions? I find the communication is so hard with my NESIFETI axis members of my family.
Right. Yeah, my brother has completely opposite functions than I do. And my sister has TI and FE. And I just constantly, when we are talking, I'm just spelling out and be like, hey, I understand. Just to let you know, like my mom and my sister had conflict at one point, and it was absolutely like a misunderstanding. Like my mom's an ISFP and my sister's an an ESTP. She's SE. They're both double feminine, but my sister is SE, FE, play, consume, sleep, and my mom is FI, SE, consume, play, sleep. So both of them have the access off from FI, FE, and that caused massive conflict. And then one's a decider and one's an observer. And the FE was like, you don't realize that your FI meh is completely like, feels like an attack on the FE, where like, I'm being shamed, I'm being judged. And my mom is like, huh? Like, just, I'm in my own FI. Nobody can see that. Right. And I'm like, no, this is what it feels like. So there was just a very different communication barrier. It felt like one was speaking a different language than the other one was speaking. So the game just becomes about, let me tell you what I feel, and then let me explain it from your perspective. So with both my siblings, they both have TI and FE. And I'm like, look, I think out loud, I ping with my thoughts, and you ping with your emotions and connections. I don't do that. So the more intensely I feel, the more I go down. The more you want to understand how you feel, the more you go tell other people. But just so you know, what that feels like is gossip to somebody like me. I don't want everybody knowing what is emotionally going on. So you can keep doing that. You can keep sharing something that is very private to your other family member, but just know that's what this feels like to me, to them, you know? And so communicating about the differences, it's just another language tool. It's like, by the way, like if you were to go live in a country where, you know, I forget which country it is, which Asian country it is, but it's like slurping your food is a sign of like, I love this and I'm respecting the chef. Where in other cultures is like, okay, stop making that noise, you know? But it's such a wildly different cultural thing that you would just like, if I live there, of course I'm going to start behaving like that, because I do want to communicate that I respect you and I appreciate this and I love the food. I want to learn, thank you, Japan. I want to learn that cultural behavior because I want to show love and care. So if you speak different languages because you have different functions, then the game just becomes about, it is China. Is it both? I feel like there's a bunch of cultures that do this. Anyways, I want to make sure that I'm communicating the right thing. I want to make sure that I'm not intentionally hurting somebody, but I also want to make sure I'm getting my needs met. So I think that that's more what it's about. It's just openly communicating about the differences so that you're not insulting somebody, even though that's not what you intended. You know, I think it's just a game of knowing you speak different languages and playing that game, you know? Yeah. I was gonna say I thought Korea, but yeah, maybe it's a lot of different cultures over there.
Yeah, it's got to be a bunch.
Yeah.
Yeah, the FEs are tracking the cultures. But yeah.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, another question. So how does trauma and specifically the healing trauma process affect type? Can you mistype as your demons if you've overcome a lot of trauma?
I'd say like with FI specifically, you're going to deal with your own traumas very personally. With FE, I feel like if you're not in therapy as an FE, get in therapy, because like if you have to talk out your emotions and you're also consciously aware of like, it's not appropriate, that's not appropriate to talk about right now, the amount of like stifling and then also need would be like intense. Like if I had FE, I don't care where it is, especially at the bottom, you should be in therapy. Like talking out your emotions. And my sister did group therapy for a while. That she like appreciated that, but that didn't work as much. And then just finding a therapist where she could constantly ping an FE back and forth, like, yes, please do that. And not that FIs can't. I think FIs will deal with things much more personally, but it's still important for us to communicate out how we're feeling and what to do. So Yeah, I think, you know, trauma seems to be very connected to the emotions and how it affects you. And yeah, I would just say, um, sure, there's a lot of mistyping. I think a lot of people will mistype themselves based on the day of the week. You know, they'll think that I'm doing a savior demon when I'm doing a demon, you know, savior demon functions. And also one thing, Brittany, that might come into play is social type. So also keep that in mind. Just
Nice.
yes.
Yep.
Different recipes for your type will make you
But yeah,
construe things.
as far as like typing goes as well, like, because I think her question was also like, hey, is someone gonna mistype me because of what I've been through?
Oh,
Maybe there's that angle to it, and I hear that.
yeah,
Well,
I think it honestly helps when,
yeah.
yeah. I
Uh,
the more somebody shares their darkness, the easier it is, the faster it
oh,
is to type them. Oh yeah,
that's good.
big time.
Yeah.
Because everybody
Um,
doesn't realize they have a very distinct, specific perspective on their trauma process. So it actually is very useful.
yeah. So share your darkness if you
Share your
can, if you want
darkness.
to.
It just makes it faster.
Yeah. So Blade's question: what is the process of choosing who you'll do a class on? Like, what are the kinds of people you have avoided making videos about, like criminals?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes, that's a good question. Most of the time, it's like, how many videos can I get on this person? So that's a lot of what ends up being is like, does this person have consistent videos and have they done something with their life enough to where I could tell a story about it? Um, you know, and so there's that. The ones that we tend to avoid, which I think I'm going to be hitting more. I might do some classes in the future by myself because when there's a negative emotion element to the person, it's hard for Dave to really want to share anything. Like he tends to stay more like, hey, let me deal with somebody positive and stuff. I tend to care more like, let's take somebody and go darker. I like sharing somebody that has a more intense history. But the problem with doing criminals, it might be something like, if I do a criminal, it would just be based on like, I can do this quickly. I can jump in and jump out, like maybe a Q&A. The problem with doing criminals is that the FE of the community gets very affected by whoever we're typing that week. And so it does hit the whole community where they're having to like soak in and take in somebody that is toxic for to type them. Like that's a lot on the emotional system. And if you don't have the practice of being able to process through all those negative, dark emotions, then you could get to a very dark place. And so Dave and I don't like to cause that on the community. So even if we did type somebody that was negative, we would dip in and then dip right back out so that we're not putting that kind of pressure on the community of shoving somebody that is a very negative person and just soaking that in. Because even if you go through like there was a time period where I went through a lot of serial killers where I was just watching them back to back, but you get in such a dark space for a really long time that if you're not resolving that consistently, then you yourself start getting pulled under. So if we do it, it'll be hitting down, going right back up because we want to keep it light for the community. Yeah. Got to be responsible for the FE.
Yeah. Speaking of Effie, we have a ESTP here from Facebook, Tim.
Hi, Tim.
He's SETI. And he asks, how do you combine being Zen, seeing past the default programs, and still having a strong drive and willpower?
That's a good question. Yeah. I think at first one happens after the other. I don't think it's something that at first those incorporate very well. A lot of it is like when you start the process of getting to a Zen place, you go all the way to the bottom. You get dark pretty intensely because you're like, oh my gosh, everything out of my mouth is just my saviors. Everything in my life is just reoccurring patterns of me doing the same thing. And that brings a lot of sadness. It brings a lot of darkness. It hits your hippocampus. You start like feeling like the world is fixed and then you start feeling fixed. So a lot of that is like an intense all in, hitting the bottom, going to the rock bottom. And then you have to kind of work through that. And that process is the Zen process where you start letting go of the mattering, letting go of this is a big deal, letting go of there is a problem with this, there's something wrong with this. It's like, nope, this is always how it was. It's totally okay. And getting to the point where you're now Zen and at peace with the reoccurring problems that you, your own self, are creating. Now the practice becomes with consciously choosing what gets you out of bed. And sometimes it is still using the triggers that are naturally happening to you, but you take them on consciously. Like when I get triggered, I don't not know what's going on nowadays. I know exactly what's going on. It still is bad chemicals that I have to deal with though, and it's still hard. So I still will use that as a way to consciously create a drive and a direction, because I am just a computer program. I am just a meat sack. I am just a ball of chemical reactions that happen. And therefore, knowing that, I can use that to go, what do I want to accomplish on this planet? Because now it's just a game of how much joy can I involve in my life? And some days are way harder than others, but there's still like, if I don't set a goal for myself tonight, get these things done by today. If I don't set a goal for this month, get this thing done by the end of the month. If I don't set a goal for the year, get these larger things moving by the end of this year, then I lose joy, and I don't want to lose joy. So I start using these things, even though it's harder because I know the game. I am conscious of the game. It's harder to be like, oh, it's real, freak out about this. It becomes choice, because you're used to getting the pump of cortisol and then taking action and then causing problems, not actually getting to where you want to go. It's now just going, I'm going to get that hit of cortisol, and I'm going to consciously put that towards the direction I've already set out for myself. You just have to be way more purposeful, because you're not automatically getting the freak out. So realize that it's you, realize that that's a game, and realize that it's really more about joy overall. And instead of avoiding problems, running towards them, because that brings more joy overall. Hope that helps.
That's a really great answer. Yeah, I know we probably don't have too much time for too many more, but there's another one from Facebook, Fara Mir, and she said if it's relevant, which unfortunately we didn't get to talk about this too much. It's about the error log.
Oh, yes.
Once we have done our 90-day tidal wave journal,
Very good.
how best do we choose which triggers to prepare for in the future? And it goes on to say, as Delta Quad events seem so SI different, I assume we record anything that leads to a shift to a primal state.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
She's at ENFP. Yeah.
That's a great question. So what I did, once I started doing my error log, the second thing that I went to after that, I called my bugs doc, which was, and eventually I got to where I was doing these monthly, where I was doing it by the month. So my dad used to call it land the planes, where he'd have all these problems and planes in his head flying around and causing problems for that particular day, that week, that month, or whatever. And he's like, help me land the planes. Like, he just wanted to land one of them at a time. So if you can get these problems landed, then there's less chaos going on in your brain, and therefore you can resolve things easier. So my bugs doc became pulling these actual categorical problems, and then I would write them on a doc. And they didn't necessarily at first have a priority to them. They were just like, do the dump, take the planes, put them in again, it's listing. It's like the OI is what really saved my life, and like creating a list. And I'd be like, okay, so this is for the month of August or whatever. Like, this is my August panic. And sometimes stuff that were longer term things would just get transferred to the next month as well, if they didn't actually get resolved. But you take that table of information, and maybe there's 15 things, maybe there's 20, but you go through it and you're like, all right, first of all, it's a game. It's which ones can I knock out quickly so that this list gets smaller, because you really need clarity of mind before you can start feeling like you're on top of these problems and you're winning these problems. You want to be like, okay, that one I can get out right away. That one I can knock out right away. That one can get off my list immediately if I just go spend 20 minutes, because then you can get them down. And some of them, depending on how your brain is doing at that time, some of them are so large that you're like, I can't even think of the small things because my whole brain is being taken over by this one. And if it's a long-term thing where it's not something you can solve in a quick amount of time, like say it's a multi-dimensional problem where there's layers and layers and layers, where in order to solve this giant problem, you need to be able to solve this and this and this and this, which are situations below this one problem. Again, grab those things, also put them on the doc, and just spend 10 minutes. If you're so overwhelmed with all of these problems, you need to be able to put them on a doc and be like, which one is really fucking with me, to where I'm like not sleeping at night. It's keeping me up. I'm not doing well during the day. I'm feeling emotionally stressed. Go after that. And if you're like, even the thought of having to attack that one panics me, spend 10 minutes. Like maybe it's like, I don't even know what I want to do for a living. Like if it's that large, it's like, hey, you need to do something small, something very small, break it down. If you have something that large that is overtaking your brain and you're not able to function the rest of your day, you need to be able to pull it apart, get more SI about that particular problem. So you're like, it's not figure out what I want to do with my life. It's go actually, maybe you just go interview in the local college and talk to, maybe you take one class at a community college so that you can start getting your brain in the practice of checking out different avenues, like find a way to make it spread apart so that action is actionable. And again, I don't care what you end up doing for that thing. You write in a little status bar that's like, I spent 10 minutes on this today. Didn't solve it, but I spent 10 minutes on this day. Maybe it's something like my mom is mad at me and I'm really stressed out about that. Maybe it's something like I'm having this consistent finance problem and I'm upset about that. And maybe it's that you go and you write a spreadsheet of all your finances. Maybe you do a budget for yourself. Maybe you pay the money and actually meet with a financial advisor. There's so many things that you can put on this list that are just a combination of bullshit that you're like, get these planes, land them, put them on my bugs doc. Call it a bugs doc because it's like, the problems that you're causing in your life. Like it's a bug. It's like if I'm fixing a website, a lot of random things will come up and you just start putting them down and you start cataloging. Look, there's 50 bugs here and the priority of them is going to change. It's going to adjust. It might be based on which one's fucking with you the most. It might be which one you can cross off the list fastest. And then you switch back and forth and you can adjust based on how can I really move through these to where I feel in control of my life? And that's what it was. I had a lot of panic attacks and stuff like that. And that became a savior for me. I stopped having panic attacks once I got all of that chaos out of my head and onto a doc. And I managed it in ways that was very like strategic, where I'm like, if I don't go through these bit by bit, they stay unresolved. So it's just a way to be able to resolve them.
Yeah. All hail the error log.
Good. Yeah.
And Dr. Shan in the multiverse of problems. I just, oh my God. Yeah. And
I love it.
Group therapy is so good. I did want to say something about that
Right.
F, that the prioritization is important. Logs and docs are very kind of thinkery. You do want to exercise some level of prioritization. And if you have FE, you may need to ping to understand, hey, is this a priority? Like, with Shan and I, like we can FI determine what's important. But for FE, you definitely need to ping back and also use extroverted functions. I know with us play first people, we're preaching a lot of demon sleep. Hey, exercise some sleeps. But for those of you who have introverted functions as a savior or sleep as a savior, consume, then do know you do want to bang on the outside world. You want to leave the house, check your mail, check on your friends, call some people, go.
If you're feeling stuck,
go outside,
that's a lot of times it's like you might need to go through 5 different kinds of things to try and figure it out. If you stay light enough, it's really like get after the core of what the problem actually is. I think that's the harder thing is when you're like, oh, I'm having this problem. And it's totally like, actually, it's a problem over here. And you're thinking that this is what your real problem is, when really you do need to emotionally just go cry. You do need to go talk to a therapist and cry this out and deal with some past trauma where you're feeling stuck. You'll be distracted by something sensory and shallow when really it's like, oh, it's actually having to do with, deeper issues. So once you figure out what the thing is, then you can throw a bunch of TE random solutions at it to try and find the solution for you. But do get conscious.
Sorry, now we're just going to get into some like rapid fire acknowledgement of people who are saying things.
Okay.
And
let's do it quickly. I got maybe 10 more minutes and then I got to go, but yes.
So you got like,
hi.
Riley here just saying hi. He's been having a good vibe. I appreciate that.
Yes.
Amina asked a question that I know you've talked about before, which is like where types come from.
I think it's from birth.
That kind of.
Yeah. I think it's genetic.
So that was a quick one. And so thank you for that. And resist rambling. That's Henry.
Hi, Henry.
ENFP. Talk about the consciousness live stream. And there's like a down and then the wisdom saving him before things get
makes sense.
Worse.
That's definitely how things happen for me as well. You got to hit rock bottom and let go. And then,
And this will be a good question for your upcoming live show on relationships. So we'll save that one, right?
Right.
Yeah, so things like
Yes.
that. And just appreciate everyone in the chat and just in general in the world. If you're watching this, probably
Yes.
at 2 times speed because we're blast last. Thank you everyone for Thank you everyone for watching, tuning in. Thank you, Shan, and thank you
Yes.
to just everyone in the world for you know, just existing and
Cover
yeah,
everyone.
yeah, just everybody, but also
Yes.
yeah, Dave, Michael, and you know
Yes.
everyone.
That's nice.
So thank you, Shan, and thank you everyone. Take
Yes.
care, and
Much love to all
bye
you
for now.
guys. Thank you so much for being here. Yes. Much love to all of you. Yes. 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 Love, love, love.